The blood-soaked soldier wasn't supposed to survive the explosion. But there he was, screaming on the gurney while black helicopters circled the hospital like vultures. Nurse Rachel Morrison knew exactly why, because she recognized the classified burn pattern on his chest, the same one that got her entire unit erased from military records 3 years ago. And the surgeon mocking her across the trauma bay? He was the reason those soldiers kept disappearing. Now she had 30 seconds to choose. Stay silent and keep hiding, or blow her cover and destroy everyone who thought a washed-up night nurse couldn't fight back. Before we dive into Rachel's story, I need your help. Follow along to see how this all ends, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. The fluorescent lights above Mercy Hill Medical Center's emergency department flickered the way they always did around 2 a.m., casting shadows across Rachel Morrison's tired face as she restocked trauma bays for the third time that shift. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, the way she'd worn it overseas, though nobody here knew that. To them, she was just another night nurse, quiet, competent enough, and forgettable. That's exactly how she needed it. Morrison. Dr. Vincent Kane's voice cut through the low hum of monitors and distant conversations. You're in Bay 3 tonight. Try not to screw anything up. Rachel didn't look up from the suture kit she was organizing. Sure thing. That's yes, doctor, Kane corrected, stepping closer. He was tall, confident, the kind of surgeon who wore his reputation like armor. I know standards were probably lower wherever you worked before, but here we expect professionalism, Rachel finished quietly. Got it. A couple of residents nearby exchanged glances. One smirked. Kane studied her for a moment, then walked away. Rachel's hands didn't shake as she continued working, even though her jaw was clenched tight enough to hurt. 3 years of this. 3 years of swallowing insults, of being invisible, of watching Kane strut through the ER like he owned every life that came through those doors. She'd gotten good at waiting. The automatic doors burst open 20 minutes later with the mechanical hiss that always preceded chaos. 2 paramedics rushed in pushing a gurney, and Rachel's trained eye caught the details before anyone started shouting. Male, mid-20s, military short haircut, severe burns covering his left torso and arm, bleeding through field dressings that looked wrong, too precise, too tactical. Trauma 1, the charge nurse called out. The ER exploded into controlled chaos. Nurses converged. Kane appeared from somewhere, already barking orders. Rachel moved toward Bay 3 like she'd been told, but something made her stop. The soldier was conscious, thrashing against the restraints as the paramedics tried to transfer him. His eyes were wide with something beyond pain, terror, maybe, or recognition of something the rest of them couldn't see. Hold him down, Kane ordered. Someone get me a sedative. We need to— Wait. Rachel's voice was barely audible. Nobody heard her. I said wait, louder this time. Kane's head snapped toward her. Excuse me? Rachel stepped closer to the gurney, her eyes locked on the soldier's exposed chest. The burns weren't random. They formed a pattern, a specific chemical signature she'd seen exactly twice before, both times in classified medical reports that were supposed to have been destroyed. Morrison, I told you Bay 3. Get out of here. But Rachel was reading the soldier's body like a language only she understood. The burn pattern, the way the shrapnel wounds clustered, the defensive injuries on his forearms. This wasn't combat trauma. This was an execution that had failed. He has a pneumothorax, Rachel said, still not looking at Kane. Left side. If you sedate him before you decompress, his lung will collapse and his heart will stop. The room went silent. Kane's face darkened. Did I ask for your assessment? No. Then shut your mouth and do your job. He turned to a resident. Prep the sedative. We're taking him to surgery. Rachel finally looked at Kane directly. He'll die. He'll die if we don't operate, and I'm not taking medical advice from a nurse who couldn't cut it anywhere else. Kane's voice carried across the entire ER now. You want to know what I heard about you, Morrison? That you worked some nobody clinic upstate before this. That you barely kept your license. That you're here because no other hospital would take you. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others watched like it was a show. So here's what's going to happen, Kane continued. You're going to walk out of this trauma bay. You're going to stay out of my way. And if you're very, very lucky, I won't report you to administration for insubordination. Are we clear? Rachel stood there for a moment, her face expressionless. Then she stepped back. The medical team moved in. Kane took control with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong, calling out orders, directing the organized chaos. The sedative was prepared. Someone held the soldier down. Rachel watched from the periphery, her hands clenched at her sides. The needle went into the soldier's IV line. 5 seconds passed. 10. The monitors began to scream. "He's crashing!" someone yelled. "Get the crash cart!" The organized chaos became actual chaos. The soldier's body convulsed once, then went still. The monitor showed a heart rate dropping fast. Kane was shouting contradictory orders, and the residents looked panicked. Rachel moved before she could think about it. She pushed past 2 nurses, grabbed a scalpel from the instrument tray, and made a single precise cut between the soldier's ribs. Her hands moved with a speed and certainty that didn't belong in a civilian hospital. She found the pressure point, released it, and suddenly the soldier was gasping, his lungs filling with air again. The monitor stabilized. The room went dead silent. Rachel stepped back, still holding the bloody scalpel, her scrubs now covered in the soldier's blood. "What the hell did you just do?" Kane's voice was barely a whisper. Before Rachel could answer, the soldier's eyes snapped open. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd just flatlined. "You," he gasped. You're her." Rachel tried to pull away. "You need to stay calm. You're safe now." "No." The soldier's grip tightened. His eyes were wild but focused. "You're Captain Morrison. They said you were dead. They said all of Shadow Med was—" "I don't know what you're talking about," Rachel said firmly, but her hands had started to shake. The soldier coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Unit 17, the chemical weapons facility. You pulled me out, you and 6 others, but the building collapsed and they told us everyone died and—" The ER doors exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. Armed men in tactical gear poured through, weapons raised, moving with military precision. They weren't police. They weren't SWAT. These were operators, the kind Rachel used to work with. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Staff dropped. Patients screamed. Chaos erupted. Rachel didn't move. The lead operator scanned the room until his eyes landed on the soldier, then on Rachel. Something shifted in his posture. Recognition, maybe, or confusion. "Secure the trauma bays," he ordered. "Nobody moves. Nobody talks." Kane tried to stand. "You can't just—" "I said down, doctor." Kane dropped. The operator approached Rachel slowly, studying her face. She could see him trying to place her, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he thought he knew. "Identify yourself," he said quietly. Rachel met his eyes. "Nurse Morrison. I work here." "Your full name?" She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Rachel Morrison." The operator's jaw tightened. He pulled out a tablet, swiped through something, then held it up so only she could see. It was a photograph. Military ID, dated 4 years ago. Same face, different name. Captain Rachel Brennan, Shadow Medical Unit. Status, KIA. "You're supposed to be dead," the operator said. "So is he," Rachel replied, nodding toward the soldier. "Looks like someone's bad at their job." The operator didn't smile. He pressed his earpiece, spoke too quietly for anyone else to hear, then looked back at Rachel. "We need to talk, privately. I'm not going anywhere until I know why that soldier has chemical burns from a weapons program that was shut down 3 years ago." The operator's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "How do you know what those burns are from?" "Because I wrote the medical protocol for treating them." Rachel's voice was steady now, the fear burned away by something older and angrier. "I wrote it after I pulled 23 soldiers out of a facility that wasn't supposed to exist, and I'm wondering why this kid has fresh wounds from the same chemical signature." The room was so quiet now that the sound of the monitors seemed deafening. Kane had pushed himself up to a sitting position, staring at Rachel like he'd never seen her before. The other staff members looked equally stunned. "You were in the military?" one of the residents whispered. Rachel ignored her. She was focused on the operator, reading his body language the way she used to read battlefield situations. He was tense, uncertain, waiting for orders from someone she couldn't see. "The program wasn't shut down," the soldier gasped from the gurney. "They moved it. Corporate contractors took over. And they've been testing on us. On veterans who couldn't say no because they threatened our families if we talked." The operator spun toward him. Shut up, now. But the soldier kept talking, his voice getting weaker. 17 of us went in. Only 3 came out. The others are still in there. In the facility outside Ridgemont. They're dying and nobody's coming for them because I said shut up. The operator took a step forward. Rachel moved between them. Touch him and you'll regret it. You're not military anymore, Captain. You don't give orders here. You're right. I'm not military. Rachel's voice dropped. Which means I don't have to follow military rules. And I'm guessing you're not supposed to be here either, or you would have announced yourself properly instead of breaking down the doors like you're raiding a terrorist compound. The operator's hand moved toward his weapon. I wouldn't, Rachel said softly, because if you shoot me in front of 40 witnesses, including security cameras, you won't be able to cover this up. And I'm thinking whatever you're really here for, you need it to stay quiet. The standoff lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes. Then the operator's earpiece crackled. He listened, his face hardening. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to Rachel. We're extracting the asset. Everyone else stays here. If anyone follows us, if anyone talks to the media, if anyone does anything except forget this happened, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Kane found his voice, though it shook. The operator looked at him for the first time. The kind that make people disappear, Dr. Kane. Rachel felt her blood turn cold. Not because of the threat, she'd heard worse, but because the operator had used Kane's name, which meant he knew who Kane was, which meant Kane was part of this. The pieces clicked together in Rachel's mind with horrible clarity. The soldier's words, the chemical burns, Kane's reaction when she'd diagnosed the pneumothorax, the way he'd tried to sedate the patient before he could talk. Kane wasn't just a surgeon, he was a collaborator. You've been covering for them, Rachel said, her voice barely audible. How long? Kane's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Rachel took a step toward him. The veteran patients who came through here with unusual symptoms, the ones who died in surgery, the medical records that went missing. You've been helping them hide what they're doing. You're insane. Am I? Rachel pulled out her phone. Because I've been keeping track. Every suspicious death, every missing file, every time you specifically took over a case involving a veteran with burn trauma. I thought I was paranoid. Turns out I was just paying attention. Kane scrambled to his feet. She's lying. Shut up, doctor. The operator's voice was ice. Both of you, shut up. But Rachel was done shutting up. She'd spent 3 years being quiet, being invisible, being the nurse nobody respected. And in those 3 years, she'd watched. She'd documented. She'd built a case against the hospital's corruption because she knew that the same people who destroyed Shadow Medical Unit hadn't stopped. They'd just gotten better at hiding. There's a flash drive in my locker, Rachel said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Locker 247. It has patient records, financial transactions, and classified documents showing that Mercy Hill Medical Center has been facilitating illegal human experimentation on veterans for at least 18 months. Dr. Kane has been falsifying autopsy reports and destroying evidence. And whoever you people work for, she gestured at the operators, you've been providing the test subjects. The operator's weapon came up. Last warning, Captain. Rachel didn't flinch. Shoot me. Please. Because the moment I don't check in with my contact at the DoD Inspector General's office tomorrow morning, everything I've collected gets released to every major media outlet in the country, including the names of everyone involved. The room erupted. Kane bolted for the exit. 2 operators moved to intercept him, but other staff members were panicking now, scrambling away from the armed men. Someone screamed. Monitors crashed to the floor. And in the chaos, Rachel heard something that made her heart stop, the soft click of a safety being released. She turned just in time to see a second operator, one she hadn't noticed before, raising his weapon. Not at her. At the wounded soldier on the gurney. Rachel moved on instinct. She grabbed a metal tray from the instrument stand and threw it. It hit the operator's arm just as he fired. The bullet went wide, slamming into the wall. Rachel was already moving, closing the distance, her training overriding 3 years of being a civilian. The operator tried to adjust his aim. Rachel grabbed his wrist, twisted, heard bones snap. The gun clattered to the floor. She kicked it away and drove her elbow into his throat. He went down choking. Everything stopped. Rachel stood over the fallen operator, breathing hard, her scrubs splattered with the soldier's blood, and her own knuckles bleeding from where she'd hit him. Every person in that ER was staring at her now, not the quiet nurse, not the woman they'd dismissed and mocked, someone else entirely. "Anyone else want to try killing a patient in my ER?" Rachel asked quietly. Nobody moved. The lead operator had his weapon trained on her now, but he wasn't firing. His eyes kept flicking between Rachel and his downed colleague, calculating odds, weighing options. "You're making this worse," he said. "No," Rachel replied. "I'm making it impossible for you to cover up. Because right now, every person in this room is a witness. Every security camera caught what just happened. And if you kill all of us, that's a massacre you can't hide. We can make you disappear, maybe. But you can't make 40 staff members disappear. You can't make the patients in the waiting room disappear. You can't make the security footage disappear fast enough." Rachel took a step forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your weapons down, you're going to let the police take over, and you're going to pray that whatever classified operation you're running is worth the congressional investigation that's about to land on your heads." The operator's earpiece crackled again. This time Rachel could hear the voice on the other end, sharp, angry, barking orders. The operator listened, his face growing darker with each word. Finally, he lowered his weapon. "Stand down," he told his team. The other operators hesitated, then complied. Rachel didn't relax. "Smart choice." "This isn't over, Captain." "No," Rachel agreed. "It's not." The distant sound of sirens was growing louder now. Someone had called the police. Good. The more official attention this got, the harder it would be to bury. Kane was pressed against the far wall, looking like he might vomit. Rachel walked toward him slowly, and he flinched. "How much did they pay you?" she asked. Kane's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "How much was it worth? To let veterans die? To falsify records? To help cover up war crimes?" I didn't know what they were doing," Kane stammered. "They told me it was classified research, national security. I thought I was helping." "You knew," Rachel said flatly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't care because they paid enough to make it easy to ignore." Kane slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. Rachel turned back to the wounded soldier. He was watching her with a mixture of awe and relief. "Are there really more of you?" she asked quietly. "More soldiers in that facility?" He nodded weakly. "They promised us medical treatment for our service-related injuries, but once we got there," his voice broke. "They started using us for tests, chemical exposure, new weapon systems, psychological experiments, and if anyone tried to leave, they threatened our families." Rachel felt rage building in her chest, the kind of cold, focused anger she'd learned to weaponize in the field. "Where exactly is this facility?" the soldier told her. Rachel pulled out her phone and sent a text message to a number she'd hoped she'd never have to use again. 3 years of silence, broken with 4 words. "I need your help." The response came back in seconds. "On my way." The police arrived 5 minutes later, followed by federal agents, followed by more military personnel wearing different uniforms than the operators. Official uniforms. The kind that meant accountability. And through it all, Rachel stood in the center of the trauma bay, covered in blood, surrounded by chaos, finally visible to everyone who'd spent years looking through her. Dr. Kane was already in handcuffs. The operators were being detained, and Rachel knew this was just the beginning, because she'd spent 3 years building a case, 3 years documenting everything, 3 years waiting for the right moment to burn it all down. The head of hospital security approached her carefully. "Miss Morrison, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning." "Of course," Rachel gestured at the soldier. "But he needs proper treatment first, real treatment, not whatever you people were planning. We'll make sure he's taken care of. You'll forgive me if I don't trust that." Rachel pulled out her phone again and made a call. When the person answered, she said simply, "It's Rachel. I need a medical team I can trust at Mercy Hill, Veterans Affairs." "Now." She hung up and looked at the security chief. "Now you can question me." An hour later, Rachel sat in an administrative conference room, still wearing her blood-stained scrubs, across from 2 federal agents who kept exchanging glances, like they weren't sure what they were dealing with. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," one of them said. "You're claiming that Mercy Hill Medical Center has been involved in illegal human experimentation on veterans, facilitated by at least one surgeon and protected by..." He checked his notes. A private military contractor. That's not what I'm claiming, Rachel said calmly. That's what I'm proving. The flash drive in my locker contains 18 months of documentation, patient records, financial transfers, communication logs, everything you need to verify what I'm telling you. And you've been collecting this evidence while working here as a nurse. Yes. Why didn't you report this through proper channels? Rachel almost laughed. Because the proper channels are compromised. I tried reporting suspicious patient deaths 6 months ago. My complaint disappeared. The hospital administrator who took my report, he died in a car accident 2 weeks later, so I stopped reporting and started documenting. The agents exchanged another look. Miss Morrison, or should we say Captain Brennan? Morrison, Rachel interrupted. I'm not military anymore. Right. Morrison, your military records show you died 3 years ago in a classified operation. My military records are wrong. Apparently. The agent leaned forward. So what really happened 3 years ago? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but distant, like she was reading from a report instead of reliving a memory. Shadow Medical Unit was attached to a joint task force investigating illegal weapons development by a defense contractor. We provided medical support for operators going into hostile facilities. One of those facilities was manufacturing chemical weapons using off-books funding and test subjects nobody would miss. Homeless veterans mostly, promised treatment and given death instead. She paused, gathering herself. We found evidence. We were extracting witnesses, and then the entire facility went up. Someone triggered the self-destruct. 27 people died in the explosion. 6 members of my unit were in the blast radius. The official report said no survivors. But you survived. I got lucky. And when I woke up in a civilian hospital 3 days later, I found out that ShadowMed had been scrubbed from all records. Our mission never happened. The facility never existed. And the defense contractor responsible? They'd already moved on to their next project. So you went underground. I changed my name, got a new nursing license, and I started looking for where they'd gone next. Rachel's eyes hardened. Turns out they just moved to a different city. Same operation, different location. And Mercy Hill was helping them. One of the agents stood and walked to the window. This is going to cause a massive scandal. Good. You understand that you'll be in danger. If what you're saying is true, there are powerful people with a vested interest in keeping this quiet. They've been trying to kill me for 3 years, Rachel said. I stopped being scared a long time ago. The door opened and a woman in a military uniform walked in. Colonel Sarah Vance, Judge Advocate General's Corps. Rachel knew her from before, from the real investigation that had been buried. Captain Brennan? Vance's voice was formal, but her eyes showed recognition. I thought you were dead. Colonel? Vance dismissed the federal agents with a gesture. When they were alone, she sat down across from Rachel. 3 years, Vance said quietly. 3 years we've been trying to find proof of what happened to ShadowMed. 3 years of hitting walls and dead ends. And you've been here the entire time. Not the entire time. It took me 8 months to track them to Mercy Hill. Why didn't you contact me? Rachel's laugh was bitter. Because the last time I trusted the chain of command, 27 people died and the criminals walked free. I wasn't going to risk it again until I had ironclad proof. And now you do. Now I do. Rachel leaned forward. The flash drive has everything, but there's more. The soldier they tried to extract tonight, he says there are more veterans being held at a facility outside Ridgemont. If we move fast, we can get them out before the contractors realize their operation is blown. Vance studied her for a long moment. You know this will destroy your cover completely. Everyone will know you're alive. Everyone will know what you've been doing. I know. You'll never be able to hide again. Good, Rachel said. I'm done hiding. Vance stood and extended her hand. Rachel took it. Welcome back, Captain, Vance said. Let's go get your people. By dawn, Mercy Hill Medical Center was swarming with federal agents. The flash drive from Rachel's locker had been secured. Kane was in federal custody, and 3 more hospital administrators had been arrested trying to flee the city. Rachel stood in the parking lot, finally out of her bloody scrubs, watching the sun rise over a situation she'd spent 3 years engineering. Her phone buzzed, a text from Vance. Facility raided. 14 veterans extracted alive. You saved them. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. 14 lives. 14 people who'd been written off, experimented on, treated like disposable assets by the same country they'd served. 14 people who were going home because one nurse refused to stay quiet. Behind her, the ER was still locked down, still processing the chaos of the night. Staff members who'd spent years dismissing her were now learning the truth. The quiet nurse who couldn't cut it anywhere else had actually been a decorated combat medic building a case against a corrupt system. Rachel's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Morrison. Captain Brennan. The voice was male, smooth, dangerous. You've made a very serious mistake. Who is this? Someone who's lost a lot of money because of your interference. The Ridgemont facility was a significant investment. Rachel's hand tightened on the phone. Then you should have invested in something legal. This isn't over. You've exposed one operation, but there are others. And now that you've revealed yourself, you're not protected anymore. You're a target. I've been a target for 3 years. The difference is now I'm a target with federal protection and a paper trail that leads directly to people like you. The voice chuckled darkly. Federal protection didn't save your unit last time. The line went dead. Rachel stared at her phone, a chill running down her spine despite the warm morning air. The voice was right about one thing. This wasn't over. She'd exposed Mercy Hill and shut down the Ridgemont facility, but these operations didn't happen in isolation. There was a network, money, power, people who'd kill to protect their investments. And now they all knew she was alive. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Vance. Press conference at 10 a.m. DOD wants you there. Rachel typed back. Will they use my real name? Yes. No more hiding. Are you ready? Rachel looked back at Mercy Hill Medical Center one more time. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of taking insults and keeping her head down. 3 years of building a case nobody else could. She typed her response. I'm ready. But as she walked toward her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that exposing the truth had only opened the door to something much bigger and much more dangerous than she'd anticipated. The system she'd uncovered wasn't just one hospital or one facility. It was everywhere. And everywhere meant the press conference was going to be a battlefield. Rachel arrived at the federal building downtown 3 hours before the scheduled announcement, escorted by 2 marshals who treated her like she might evaporate if they blinked. The building's underground parking garage was already swarming with news vans, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like metal flowers reaching for attention. She counted at least 15 different networks. This is going to be a circus, one of the marshals muttered. Rachel didn't respond. She was too busy watching the faces of people entering the building. Lawyers in expensive suits, military brass with chests full of medals, corporate types who walked like they owned the concrete beneath their feet. Every single one of them looked at her with the same calculation, threat assessment. Colonel Vance met her at the security checkpoint, clipboard in hand and tension written across her shoulders. We need to prep you. The DOD wants a unified message, meaning they want to control what I say, meaning they want to make sure you don't accidentally compromise ongoing investigations. Vance steered her toward an elevator. Rachel, you've opened a door that connects to about a dozen different federal cases. Human trafficking, weapons trafficking, fraud, conspiracy. Some of these threads go back 15 years. The elevator doors closed and Rachel finally let herself lean against the wall. She'd been running on adrenaline and coffee for 36 hours straight. Her hands were steady, but her head was starting to pound. How many people are we talking about? She asked. Victims or perpetrators? Both. Vance's jaw tightened. We've identified at least 43 veterans who passed through facilities connected to this network in the last 5 years. 22 are confirmed deceased. The rest... She trailed off. The rest what? We don't know. They disappeared from VA records. No forwarding addresses. No family contact. Nothing. Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. They're still being held somewhere. That's the working theory. The elevator opened onto the 8th floor, where a conference room had been converted into a command center. Screens covered one wall, showing maps, photographs, organizational charts that looked like spider webs. Rachel recognized some of the faces. Contractors she'd seen at military briefings years ago, hospital administrators, even a few congressional staffers. Jesus, she breathed. It gets worse. Vance handed her a tablet. We pulled Kane's financial records. In the past 18 months alone, he received over $2 million in consulting fees from a shell company called Apex Medical Solutions. That company is owned by 3 different defense contractors, all of whom have been under DoD investigation for various violations. Rachel scrolled through the documents, her medical training making sense of what others might miss. The patients Kane had treated or mistreated weren't random. They all had specific skill sets: explosives experts, communication specialists, pilots, high-value targets who'd know too much if they ever decided to talk. They were silencing witnesses, she said quietly. That's what we think. And Kane wasn't the only doctor involved. Vance pulled up another screen. We've identified 6 other physicians across 4 states who received similar payments. All of them worked at hospitals with significant veteran populations. All of them had patients who died under suspicious circumstances. A man in a dark suit entered the room, his federal badge visible on his belt. Agent Marcus Webb, DOJ Criminal Division. Rachel had dealt with him during the original ShadowMed investigation, back when everyone still pretended to care about justice. Captain Brennan, Webb said, not offering his hand. Glad to see the reports of your death were exaggerated. Agent Webb, still climbing the ladder. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Still tilting at windmills? The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Vance stepped between them. We don't have time for this. The press conference starts in 2 hours, and we need to coordinate. Actually, Webb said, his tone shifting to bureaucratic ice, we need to discuss whether Captain Brennan should appear at all. Rachel's exhaustion vanished, replaced by pure anger. Excuse me? Your presence complicates things. You're a witness in an ongoing investigation. You obtained evidence through questionable means. And frankly, your background raises questions about credibility. My background. Rachel took a step forward. I served 8 years as a combat medic. I saved more lives in one tour than you'll see in your entire career, and I spent 3 years undercover building a case that your department couldn't crack in a decade. So forgive me if I don't give a damn about your concerns. Webb's expression hardened. I'm trying to protect this case. If defense attorneys can paint you as a rogue operator with a grudge, everything we've built falls apart. Then build a better case. Rachel. Vance's voice carried a warning. Agent Webb has a point. Your involvement does create complications. Rachel looked at Vance, feeling something like betrayal twist in her chest. You're seriously considering sidelining me? I'm considering all the angles. The angle where the woman who did your job for you gets pushed aside so the big boys can take credit? The room went silent. Webb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went pale. We have a problem. He turned one of the screens toward them. A news broadcast was playing, some talking head on a cable channel Rachel didn't recognize. But the caption at the bottom made her blood run cold. Leaked, military nurse exposes secret experiments. Conspiracy or hoax? Someone leaked the story, Vance said unnecessarily. Webb was already making phone calls, barking orders. Rachel watched the screen as the broadcast cut to footage. Security camera video from Mercy Hill's ER. Grainy but unmistakable. Her performing the field decompression on the soldier. The armed operator storming in. The confrontation. How did they get that? Vance demanded. Does it matter? Rachel's voice was flat. It's out now. Which means every contractor connected to this knows exactly who I am and where I was. As if on cue, Vance's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face drained of color. When? How many? A pause. Lock it down. Nobody in or out. She hung up and looked at Rachel. Mercy Hill Medical Center just went into emergency lockdown. Someone attempted to access the administration wing where we're holding evidence. Armed suspect, still at large in the building. They're destroying evidence, Rachel said. Or looking for more of it. Webb was typing frantically on his laptop. We need to move up the press conference. If we don't control this narrative right now, it's going to spiral. Rachel was already moving toward the door. I need to get back to Mercy Hill. Absolutely not. Vance blocked her path. You're a target now. You go anywhere near that hospital and what? I hide while someone destroys everything I worked for? Rachel's voice cracked. Those are my records. My evidence. My case. It's our case now, Webb said. Federal jurisdiction. You did your part. Let us do ours. Rachel wanted to punch him. She wanted to scream. Instead, she forced herself to breathe. To think like the captain she used to be instead of the nurse she'd pretended to be. "Fine," she said. "What do you need from me?" Webb looked surprised. Vance looked suspicious. "For the press conference," Rachel clarified. "What do you need me to say?" 2 hours later, Rachel stood backstage at a federal press room, listening to the murmur of reporters beyond the curtain. Someone had found her a clean suit that didn't quite fit. Someone else had tried to do something with her hair. She looked almost respectable, almost like someone who belonged at a podium with federal seals. Almost. "You ready?" Vance asked, appearing at her elbow. "No." "Good. That means you're thinking clearly." Vance handed her a bottle of water. "Webb wants you to stick to the prepared statement. No improvising, no accusations without proof, just the facts." "Since when do I follow Webb's orders?" "Since refusing could derail multiple investigations and let a lot of bad people walk free." Vance's voice softened. "I know you want justice, so do I, but this has to be done right." Rachel took a sip of water, buying time to organize her thoughts. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the press room filling up. Network anchors, print journalists, bloggers with cameras, and in the back, partially hidden, a man in an expensive suit who was definitely not press. "Who's that?" she asked, nodding toward him. Vance followed her gaze and her expression went carefully neutral. "That's Harrison Locke, CEO of Sentinel Defense Group." "One of the contractors?" "The biggest one. His company has contracts with every branch of military, plus Homeland Security and the VA. Vance paused. "He's also a major campaign donor to half of Congress. And he's here because he wants to see who's threatening his empire." Vance checked her watch. 2 minutes. "You sure you can do this?" Rachel wasn't sure of anything except that walking onto that stage meant there was no going back. No more hiding, no more pretending to be someone forgettable. She'd be Captain Rachel Brennan again, with all the attention and danger that entailed. The curtain opened. Rachel walked into a wall of camera flashes and shouted questions. She took her place behind the podium, flanked by Vance and Webb, facing an audience that looked hungry for scandal. Webb spoke first, his voice professional and detached. He outlined the basics, an ongoing investigation into medical malpractice and fraud involving veterans. He thanked multiple agencies for their cooperation. He promised accountability. He made it sound routine, boring even. Then it was Rachel's turn. She unfolded her prepared statement, looked at the words Webb's people had written for her, and made a decision. "My name is Rachel Brennan," she began, and immediately the room exploded with questions. She talked over them. 3 years ago, I was declared killed in action while investigating a defense contractor's illegal weapons program. That declaration was wrong. I survived. And what I found after waking up was worse than the explosion that was supposed to kill me." Webb was giving her a look that could melt steel. Rachel ignored him. "I found a system that treats veterans like disposable assets, a network of hospitals and contractors working together to silence anyone who knew too much about illegal operations. And I found doctors who took payment to make sure those veterans never talked." The reporters were on their feet now, shouting over each other. Camera flashes turned the room into a strobe light. Rachel's hands gripped the podium hard enough to hurt. "For 3 years, I worked undercover as a nurse at Mercy Hill Medical Center. I documented evidence of systematic abuse, falsified medical records, and what I believe constitutes murder. 18 months of evidence that connects physicians, administrators, and defense contractors in a conspiracy to commit fraud and human trafficking." "Captain Brennan," Webb hissed from beside her. She kept talking. "I'm here today because a wounded veteran came through those emergency room doors 2 nights ago and almost died. Not from his injuries, but from the people who were supposed to save him. That soldier is alive because I broke cover. And 14 other veterans are alive because federal agents raided the facility where they were being held against their will." "Who gave the orders?" someone shouted from the crowd. "That's what the investigation will determine," Webb cut in, taking over the microphone. "We're not prepared to name suspects at this time." "Was Dr. Vincent Kane working alone?" another reporter yelled. "The investigation is ongoing," Webb repeated, but Rachel leaned back toward the microphone. "He wasn't working alone. The evidence shows a network spanning multiple states, multiple hospitals, and multiple contractors. This isn't one bad doctor. This is systemic." The press room devolved into chaos. Reporters rushed forward. Security moved to establish a perimeter. And in the back, Harrison Locke was already on his phone, his expression murderous. Vance grabbed Rachel's arm and pulled her backstage. What the hell was that? The truth. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to let Webb sanitize everything until nobody could tell what actually happened. Rachel jerked her arm free. I didn't spend 3 years hiding to watch this get buried under bureaucratic language. Webb appeared, his face red with anger. You just compromised multiple investigations. Defense attorneys will use that statement to claim we're conducting a witch hunt. Suspects will flee. Evidence will disappear. Congratulations, Captain. You may have just destroyed everything. Or, Rachel countered, I just made it impossible for you to sweep this under the rug when the pressure gets too high. They glared at each other until Vance's phone rang. She answered, listened, and went pale. Mercy Hill, she said quietly. The suspect escaped, but before he did, he accessed the server room and wiped multiple hard drives. Rachel's heart dropped. My evidence? Most of it was already copied to federal servers, but anything that wasn't... Vance shook her head. Gone. Webb cursed under his breath. This is a disaster. But Rachel was thinking, connecting pieces. The leak, the attack on Mercy Hill, Locke showing up here. They're coordinating a response. You're paranoid, Webb said. She's right, Vance countered. This is too organized to be random. They knew about the press conference. They knew about the evidence location. Someone on the inside is feeding them information. Webb's expression shifted from angry to calculating. Then we have a mole. Or moles, plural, Rachel said. These people have been operating for years. You don't maintain that kind of secrecy without people in key positions. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. You should have stayed dead. She showed it to Vance. We're getting you into protective custody, Vance said immediately. Now. No. That's not a request, Captain. I don't care. Rachel pocketed her phone. Protective custody means sitting in a safe house while they clean up loose ends, which means making sure I can't testify to anything they don't want testified. You think we'd harm you? Webb sounded genuinely offended. I think someone in the federal government is compromised, and until I know who, I'm not trusting anyone. Rachel looked at Vance. No offense. Some taken, Vance replied, but you're not wrong to be cautious. A commotion in the hallway made them all turn, shouting, running footsteps. Then one of the marshals burst through the door. We have a situation, he said, breathing hard. Building security just flagged a vehicle in the parking garage, no plates, tinted windows. When they approached, the driver pulled a weapon. Lockdown protocol, Webb ordered. Nobody in or out until we clear the threat. But Rachel was already moving toward the window. From the 8th floor, she could see the street below. Police cars converging, federal agents taking positions. And beyond them, a black SUV idling at the corner, identical to the one she'd seen outside Mercy Hill. They're not here to attack the building, she said quietly. They're here for me. Vance joined her at the window. How do you know? Because that's what I would do, create chaos. Force an evacuation, grab the target in the confusion. Rachel turned from the window. This is an extraction attempt. Or an assassination, Webb added grimly. He was on his radio now, coordinating with building security. We're moving you to a secure floor. Let me do my job, Captain. Rachel wanted to argue, but she could see the logic. Staying put meant being a sitting target. Moving meant variables, options, ways to fight back if necessary. They took the stairs, Rachel, Vance, Webb, and 4 armed marshals. The stairwell echoed with their footsteps, with radio chatter, with the distant sound of alarms. Somewhere below, people were evacuating. Somewhere above, sniper teams were taking positions on the roof. And somewhere in the building, someone was hunting her. They reached the 6th floor when Rachel heard it, footsteps in the stairwell below, moving fast and military precise. Too precise for evacuating office workers. Contact, one of the marshals said into his radio. 3 suspects entering the north stairwell, armed. Webb cursed. How did they get past security? Badges, Rachel said, understanding clicking into place. They didn't break in. They walked through the front door using stolen or fake federal credentials, which meant they'd planned this, which meant they'd known Rachel would be here, which meant the leak went higher than anyone wanted to admit. The marshals formed a defensive position as the footsteps grew louder. Rachel could hear tactical calls being made below, professional, coordinated, probably ex-military just like her. These weren't random shooters. These were operators. Move, Vance ordered, pushing Rachel toward the sixth-floor exit. We'll hold them here. You'll die here, Rachel corrected. 4 marshals against a team of trained killers? Those aren't good odds. They're better than letting you get caught in the crossfire. Rachel was about to argue when gunfire erupted from below. Not the scattered shots of amateurs, but the controlled bursts of people who knew exactly what they were doing. The marshals returned fire, their weapons deafening in the enclosed space. Vance grabbed Rachel and hauled her through the 6th-floor door. Webb followed, already on his radio calling for backup. The floor was abandoned, offices empty, lights automatically shutting off in sections to save energy. Perfect place for an ambush. This way, Webb directed, moving toward the center of the building where internal rooms would provide more cover. Rachel followed, her medical training screaming that running toward the interior meant cutting off escape routes, but her combat training agreed with Webb's logic. Outer walls had windows, and windows meant sniper lanes. They made it 20 feet before the elevator dinged. All 3 of them froze. The doors opened and 2 men stepped out, both armed, both wearing clothing that could pass for business casual but moved like operators. They saw Rachel and raised their weapons. Webb returned fire first. The hallway exploded with noise and muzzle flashes. Rachel dropped to the floor, instinct taking over, crawling toward cover behind a reception desk. Vance was beside her, weapon drawn, face grim. How many? Rachel shouted over the gunfire. Too many, Vance fired twice. They coordinated this entire thing. The vehicle outside was a distraction. The real team was already inside. One of the attackers went down. The other ducked back into the elevator alcove. Webb was reloading when the stairwell door burst open and 3 more armed men poured through. They were surrounded. Rachel's mind raced through options. The building was in lockdown. Backup was coming but might not arrive in time. Webb and Vance were good but outnumbered, and she was unarmed, exhausted, running on fumes and anger. Not ideal conditions for survival. We need to move, she said to Vance. Staying here means… The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in after a 2-second delay, bathing everything in red. In that darkness, Rachel heard movement, fast, coordinated, tactical. The attackers were using the cover to reposition. North hallway, Vance whispered. There's a service elevator. If we can reach it… Gunfire cut her off. Webb grunted, went down. Rachel crawled toward him, her hands finding warm blood soaking through his suit jacket. Shoulder wound, painful but not immediately fatal if she could stop the bleeding. I'm fine, Webb gasped. Go. I'm a medic. I don't leave wounded. You're a target. If they get you, this entire thing dies with you. Webb's hand closed around her wrist. Go. That's an order. Vance was already pulling Rachel away, weapon firing to provide cover. They ran through red-lit hallways, past darkened offices, toward the service elevator Vance had mentioned. Behind them, Rachel could hear shouting, more gunfire, the sound of a building at war with itself. The elevator door was ahead. Vance hit the button and nothing happened. Power's cut, Rachel said, stating the obvious. Emergency generators should… Vance tried again. Still nothing. They disabled it. Of course they had. Professionals didn't leave escape routes open. Rachel looked around, mind working through the building's layout. They were in the center of the 6th floor. Attackers behind them, no working elevator, windows too far away. But there… Maintenance shaft, she said, pointing to a narrow door marked with warning signs. Buildings this old have vertical shafts for utilities. Cramped, but they connect every floor. That's a last resort. We're out of resorts. Rachel was already moving toward it, yanking the door open. Inside was exactly what she'd expected. A dark, narrow shaft with a metal ladder bolted to one wall, pipes and cables running the height of the building. We go up. They'll expect us to go down. Up means the roof. That's a dead end. Up means sniper teams and helicopter support. I'll take those odds. Rachel started climbing without waiting for agreement. Vance followed after a moment's hesitation, pulling the door shut behind them. The shaft was claustrophobic and dark and smelled like rust and old water. Rachel climbed steadily, her hands finding each rung by feel, her training overriding the instinct to panic. Behind her, Vance's breathing was controlled but labored. Below them, the shaft door opened. Climb faster, Vance said unnecessarily. Rachel pushed harder, muscles burning. She could hear footsteps on the ladder below now, echoing up the shaft. The attackers were following. Of course they were. She'd eliminated their element of surprise, so now it was a race. Her hand found the ninth floor access door. She pushed it open and pulled herself out, Vance right behind her. They slammed the door and Vance jammed something into the mechanism. A pen, probably, buying them seconds. Roof access, Vance gasped, pointing. End of the hall. They ran. Rachel's lungs burned and her legs felt like concrete, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. The roof access door was heavy, secured with a push-bar alarm that screamed when they hit it. Good. Let the whole building know where they were. Let the sniper teams on the roof know someone was coming through. They burst onto the roof into harsh sunlight and wind that nearly knocked Rachel over. Federal agents were already there, weapons trained on the door. When they saw Vance's uniform, the guns lowered fractionally. 2 hostiles in the maintenance shaft, Vance reported breathlessly. Multiple attackers on the 6th floor. We have an agent down. The team leader was already coordinating, speaking rapidly into his radio. A helicopter Rachel hadn't noticed before lifted off from the far corner of the roof, banking toward them. Extraction. Get her on board, the team leader ordered, gesturing at Rachel. Protective custody, secure location, no deviations. Rachel wanted to refuse, but she was too tired to argue. Too tired to do anything except climb into the helicopter when it landed, Vance following. The door gunner kept his weapon trained on the roof access as they lifted off. Below them, the federal building looked like a war zone. Police cars everywhere. Federal agents securing the perimeter. And somewhere in that chaos, people who wanted her dead. Where are we going? Rachel shouted over the rotor noise. Vance didn't answer immediately. She was looking at her phone, reading something that made her expression go from relieved to horrified. What? Rachel demanded. Webb's secure. They got him out. Vance looked up, and Rachel saw fear in her eyes. But he wasn't the only casualty. 2 marshals were killed in the stairwell, 3 federal agents wounded, and... She stopped. And what? Harrison Locke is holding an emergency press conference in 1 hour. His lawyers are claiming the DOJ is conducting an illegal witch hunt based on false testimony from a mentally unstable former soldier with a vendetta. Rachel felt cold despite the helicopter's cramped warmth. He's getting ahead of the story. He's killing it before it can spread. Vance put her phone away. And if he succeeds, if he paints you as a conspiracy theorist with PTSD, everything you documented becomes questionable. Every piece of evidence gets tainted. Every investigation gets derailed. Then we need to fight back. With what? Half our evidence was destroyed at Mercy Hill. The rest is locked up in federal databases that take warrants to access. And you're about to disappear into protective custody where you can't talk to anyone. Vance's frustration was palpable. Locke has unlimited resources and political connections. We have a contaminated crime scene and a narrative that's already turning against us. The helicopter banked, heading toward what Rachel assumed was a secure facility outside the city. She looked down at the sprawling urban landscape, at the thousands of people going about their lives completely unaware that beneath the surface, a war was being fought over truth and accountability. And she was losing. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Landing pad secured. Welcome to your cage. Rachel stared at the message, ice forming in her stomach. She looked at Vance, then at the door gunner, then at the pilots. Any of them could be compromised. All of them could be compromised. Change of plans, Rachel said quietly. Vance frowned. What? Rachel pointed at her phone. They know where we're going. Vance's face went white. She leaned forward, showed her credentials to the pilot. New destination, FBI field office, downtown, now. The pilot shook his head. Orders are to proceed to... I'm changing the orders, downtown, FBI. That's not a request. The pilot hesitated, then spoke into his radio. A conversation Rachel couldn't hear. Then he banked the helicopter, turning back toward the city. Vance sat back, breathing hard. If they know our secure locations, we're compromised at a level I don't want to think about. Then think about it, Rachel said, because someone high up is feeding them information, and until we figure out who, nowhere is safe. The helicopter descended toward the FBI field office, landing on a rooftop pad surrounded by armed agents. Rachel climbed out, legs unsteady, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She'd been awake for 48 hours straight. She'd survived 2 attempts on her life. She'd blown apart her entire cover. And Harrison Locke was about to bury everything she'd worked for under an avalanche of lawyers and public relations spin. Inside the FBI building, Rachel was escorted to a conference room that looked exactly like every federal conference room she'd ever been in. Gray walls, government-issue furniture, a table that had seen too many crisis meetings. Vance made phone calls while Rachel sat and tried to organize her thoughts into something coherent. A television in the corner showed Locke's press conference starting. He stood at a podium in an expensive suit, flanked by lawyers, looking every inch the wronged businessman. I want to address the serious and defamatory accusations made today by federal officials and a former military member with a documented history of psychological trauma, Locke began, his voice smooth and reasonable. Sentinel Defense Group has served this nation for 30 years. We have provided critical support to our armed forces, saved countless lives, and maintained the highest ethical standards. Rachel watched, her hands clenched into fists. The accusations leveled today are not just false, they're dangerous. They undermine trust in the institutions that keep us safe. They damage the reputation of honorable physicians and contractors, and they stem from a troubled individual who has spent years pursuing a personal vendetta against people trying to do their jobs. He's good, Vance said grimly, joining Rachel at the TV. He's making you sound unstable and making himself sound like the victim. Captain Brennan's tragic story is one of service and sacrifice that ended in profound trauma, Locke continued, and Rachel wanted to put her fist through the screen. But her pain does not justify false accusations. Her suffering does not excuse slander, and we will vigorously defend ourselves and our employees against these baseless claims through every available legal avenue. The press ate it up. Rachel could see it in their faces, in their questions. They were already second-guessing, already wondering if maybe this decorated veteran was just broken and looking for someone to blame. Vance turned off the TV. He's winning. Rachel didn't respond. She was staring at the blank screen, thinking about the 14 veterans pulled from that facility, thinking about the soldier who'd survived despite Kane's interference, thinking about 3 years of evidence and sacrifice that was about to mean nothing because a man with money and connections could hire better storytellers. "We need Kane," she said suddenly. "Kane's lawyered up. He's not talking." "Then we make him talk." Rachel stood, ignoring her protesting muscles. "He's the weak link. He knows names, operations, where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. If we can flip him, get him to testify against people who can make him disappear, he'll never do it. He will if he thinks disappearing is his only other option." Rachel was pacing now, energy returning as her mind found a problem to solve. "Kane's a coward. He helped murder veterans for money, which means he values his own life more than anyone else's. We just need to convince him that his life depends on cooperation." Vance was already shaking her head. "We can't threaten him. I'm not talking about threats. I'm talking about protection. Kane knows people want him dead to keep him quiet. Right now he's probably terrified, sitting in a cell wondering if his lawyers can actually keep him alive." Rachel stopped pacing. "We offer him a way out. Witness protection, new identity, safety for him and anyone he cares about, in exchange for everything. The DOJ will never agree to a deal without—" "Then we don't go through DOJ." Rachel looked at Vance. "You're JAG. You have authority to negotiate in military matters, especially when they involve active investigations into defense contractors. Kane treated active military personnel. That puts it in your jurisdiction." Vance considered this. "It's a stretch. It's a loophole. Use it." For a long moment, Vance didn't respond. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Rachel couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Vance's expression shift from uncertain to determined. "We have 1 hour," Vance said when she hung up. "Kane's being held at a federal detention center 40 minutes from here. His lawyers are trying to arrange bail, which means we need to talk to him before he walks." They made the drive in a federal sedan with an armed escort, racing through traffic while Rachel tried to prepare for a conversation she'd been mentally rehearsing for 3 years. What do you say to someone who killed people you'd tried to save? How do you stay calm enough to be persuasive instead of vengeful? The detention center was concrete and razor wire, and guards who looked at Rachel like she might be dangerous, which technically she was. Vance cleared them through security, and they were led to an interview room where Kane sat handcuffed to a table, looking significantly less confident than he had in the ER. He saw Rachel and went pale. "No," he said immediately. "I want my lawyer. I'm not talking to her." "Your lawyer isn't here," Vance said, sitting down across from him. "But I am. Colonel Sarah Vance, Judge Advocate General's Corps, and I have a question for you, Dr. Kane. Do you want to live?" Kane's eyes darted between them. "Is that a threat?" "It's a question, because the people you worked for, they're watching this facility right now trying to figure out how to shut you up permanently. Your lawyers can't protect you from that. Federal marshals can't protect you from that. But we can." "I don't know what you're talking about." Rachel leaned forward. "Yes, you do. You know exactly what you did. You falsified records. You performed unnecessary procedures. You killed veterans who knew too much about illegal operations. And you did it for money. That's insane. I would never—" "Save it." Rachel's voice was cold. "I have 18 months of documentation proving every word. Financial records, patient files, video footage of you receiving instructions from Sentinel defense contractors. You're done, Kane. The only question is whether you die in here or die free under a new name." Kane's breathing had gotten faster. "What do you want?" "Everything," Vance said. "Names, operations, facilities, everyone involved in this network. You give us that, you walk away. New identity, new life. Protection from the people who want you dead. And if I don't, then you go to trial, where you become the public face of this scandal, while the real monsters stay hidden. Then you go to prison, where someone will eventually get to you no matter how much security we provide. Then you die, and your family spends the rest of their lives wondering if they're next." Vance pulled out a tablet and showed him something Rachel couldn't see. "Or you could end up like Dr. Patricia Hammond." Kane's face went from pale to gray. "What happened to Patricia?" "Car accident. 3 days ago. Brake failure. She died on impact." Vance's voice was matter-of-fact. "Dr. Hammond was one of the other physicians on our list. Coincidentally, she died the same day our investigation became public knowledge." That's just coincidence?" Rachel finished. "How many coincidences before you recognize a pattern? How many of your colleagues need to die before you realize you're on the list?" Kane was shaking now. "They'll kill me if I talk." "They'll kill you if you don't," Rachel corrected. "The only difference is whether you die having done the right thing or die protecting the people who used you." The room fell silent except for Kane's ragged breathing. Rachel could see him calculating, weighing options, trying to find an angle that let him survive with his conscience intact. But there was no angle. There was only the truth, and the truth meant betraying everyone he'd worked with. Finally, Kane looked up. "I want immunity. Full immunity. And protection for my daughter." "You have a daughter?" This was news to Rachel. "She's 16, lives with her mother in Boston. If I testify, if I give you names—" Kane's voice broke. "They'll go after her." Vance and Rachel exchanged glances. A daughter changed everything. It gave Kane motivation beyond self-preservation. It made him human instead of just a monster. "We can protect her," Vance said carefully. "But you need to give us everything. No holding back. No protecting friends. Every name, every operation, every crime you witnessed or participated in." Kane nodded slowly. Okay. But I want it in writing. Immunity and protection for both of us. And I want to be transferred somewhere secure before I start talking." "Agreed." Vance was already typing up the preliminary agreement on her tablet. "But we need something now. Proof that you're serious. Give us one name, one person we don't already know about." Kane closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were full of something Rachel recognized, the look of someone who'd finally decided to stop running. "Senator Mitchell Ashford," Kane said quietly. "He's on the Armed Services Committee. He's been protecting Sentinel Defense from oversight for 8 years, and he's the one who ordered the Shadow Medical Unit eliminated." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Rachel felt the world tilt. Senator Ashford. She knew that name. Everyone in the military knew that name. He was a war hero turned politician, a respected voice on defense issues, someone who'd built his career on supporting troops, and he'd ordered her unit killed. "You're sure?" Vance said, her voice tight. "I'm sure. I was in the room when Locke took the call. Ashford told him to eliminate the problem before it infected the committee's work. Those were his exact words. Locke interpreted that as ordering the facility destruction. Kane looked at Rachel. You were supposed to die in that explosion. They thought you had. Rachel couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years of wondering who'd given the order. 3 years of hunting faceless contractors while the real enemy had been sitting in Congress the entire time, voting on defense budgets and military policy. We need to move on this now, Vance said, already on her phone. If Ashford is involved, he'll know we're closing in. He'll run or destroy evidence or...
He's already been warned, Rachel interrupted, her voice hollow. The leak, the coordinated attacks. Someone's been feeding information to the contractors, and if Ashford is running point on protecting them, he's probably running point on silencing us, too. Vance stopped mid-dial. Which means he knows about Kane. He knows Kane's in custody, and he knows Kane is the one person who can directly implicate him. They both turned to look at Kane, who'd gone very pale.
We need to move you now, Vance said. Not tomorrow, not in an hour. Now. She was already moving toward the door when the lights went out. Not flickering, not brownouts, just instant, total darkness. Rachel's combat instincts screamed danger. Get down! She grabbed Kane, who was still handcuffed to the table, and pulled him as far under it as the restraints allowed. Vance had her weapon out, moving by feel toward the door. Then they heard it. Gunfire. Shouting. The sound of a facility under assault. They're here, Kane whispered, his voice high with terror. Oh God, they're here. They're going to kill me. They're going to... Shut up, Rachel hissed. She was patting down Kane's pockets, looking for anything useful. Nothing, just lint and a handkerchief. She turned to where she thought Vance was. Keys, I need the handcuff keys. Metal jangled in the dark. Rachel caught them by sound and touch, her hands finding the cuffs, working by feel to unlock them. Kane was free 30 seconds later, just as something heavy hit the interview room door. Not a knock, an impact. Someone trying to break through. Vance fired through the door before it could open completely. 3 controlled bursts that bought them seconds. The return fire was immediate and professional, punching holes through the reinforced metal like it was cardboard. Ventilation shaft, Rachel said, her hands already feeling along the wall. Every detention facility had them, required by fire code. Her fingers found the grate, and she yanked hard, using adrenaline to rip it free from bolts that should have held. Move. Kane hesitated, and Rachel shoved him forward. You want your daughter to have a father? Climb. He climbed. Vance provided cover fire as Rachel pulled herself into the shaft behind Kane, then Vance followed, kicking at the grate to wedge it partially closed. It wouldn't stop anyone, but it might slow them down. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for shoulders, and the metal was slick with condensation. Rachel could hear Kane's panicked breathing ahead of her, the scrape of his shoes against metal, and behind them the sound of the interview room door finally giving way. Left at the junction, Vance called from behind. Should lead toward the main corridor. Should. Rachel had been in enough facilities to know that blueprints and reality didn't always match, especially in older buildings that had been renovated multiple times. But left was away from the gunfire, so left it was. Kane made the turn too fast and slipped, his body wedging in the narrow space. Rachel could feel him struggling, could hear the whimper building in his throat. Breathe out, she ordered. Make yourself smaller. Push with your legs, not your arms. I can't. You can or you die here. Choose. He chose. 30 seconds of struggling and he was through, moving faster now, motivated by pure survival instinct. Rachel followed, her shoulders screaming where the metal edges dug in, her lungs burning from the stale air and exertion. Behind them, flashlight beams cut through the darkness of the ventilation system. They'd been followed into the shaft. How far? Rachel asked Vance. 50 feet to the corridor junction. Then we're exposed. 50 feet. Rachel could hear the pursuers gaining ground, their movements more efficient because they weren't slowed by a panicking doctor. She did the math in her head. They wouldn't make it. The attackers would catch them before they reached the junction, and in these close quarters, there was no room to fight. Unless... Vance, Rachel said quietly, when I say drop, you drop flat and don't move. What are you... Trust me. Rachel could see light ahead now, the junction where the ventilation shaft opened into a larger space. 20 feet. 15. The pursuers were close enough that she could hear their breathing,
could smell gun oil and tactical gear. 10 feet. Drop!
Rachel flattened herself against the bottom of the shaft as Vance did the same. Behind them, the lead pursuer rounded the corner at speed, weapon raised, and didn't see the junction in time. He flew out of the shaft into open air, his surprise shout cut short by the impact with the concrete floor 2 stories below. His partner stopped just short of the edge, weapon still trained forward, but hesitant now. Rachel didn't give him time to think. She kicked backward with both feet, catching him in the face. The confined space magnified the impact. He dropped like a stone, his weapon clattering away into darkness. Go, 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 Vance urged. They scrambled out of the shaft into what Rachel recognized as a maintenance corridor, industrial and utilitarian. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. Alarms were still screaming. Somewhere distant, more gunfire echoed through the facility. Kane was on his hands and knees, gasping. I can't do this. Rachel grabbed his collar and hauled him upright. Senator Ashford ordered my unit killed. 27 people died. You're going to live long enough to testify to that, even if I have to carry you out of here myself. Something in her voice must have penetrated Kane's panic because he nodded shakily and stood. Vance was checking her weapon, ejecting the magazine to count rounds. Half a clip. No spare. We need to reach the armory or find another way out. Armory means going toward the security center, Rachel said. That's where they'll expect us. Then where? Rachel oriented herself, remembering the layout from when they'd entered. Detention facilities were designed to keep people in, which meant limited exits, but they also had to accommodate emergencies. Fire, medical, structural failure. There would be secondary exits, less obvious ones that maintenance staff and administration used. Medical wing, she said. Facilities like this always have a separate ambulance bay for prisoner transport. If we can reach it. An explosion rocked the building. Not close, but powerful enough to shake the walls and rain dust from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered and died completely for 3 seconds before the backup system engaged. In that darkness, Rachel heard Kane whimpering again and Vance swearing. They're not trying to capture us, Vance said. They're trying to destroy the entire facility. Can't have witnesses if there's no one left to witness, Rachel agreed. Medical wing, now. They ran through corridors that smelled like disinfectant and fear, past cells where prisoners were shouting in panic, past offices where staff had barricaded themselves inside. Rachel led them by memory and instinct, taking turns that felt right, avoiding areas where she could hear combat. The medical wing door was ahead, marked with a blue cross that glowed faintly in the emergency lighting. Rachel hit it at speed and it opened into a long hallway lined with treatment rooms. Empty. The staff had evacuated. Ambulance bay is through there, Vance said, pointing at double doors at the far end. They were halfway down the hallway when Kane grabbed Rachel's arm. Wait! We don't have time. My daughter's medical records are in the facility database. They'll use them to find her. Kane's voice was steadier now, focused by something beyond fear. I need to wipe them. The terminal in that office. He pointed at a door marked records. Rachel wanted to refuse. Every second they stayed was a second closer to being caught or killed. But she understood what he was saying. Without those records, finding his daughter would take time. Time that could mean the difference between her living and dying. 2 minutes, Rachel said. Vance watched the door. Kane practically fell into the records office, his hands shaking as he accessed the terminal. Rachel stood behind him, watching his fingers fly across the keyboard. He knew the system, knew the shortcuts, moved with the confidence of someone who'd accessed these records before for less noble purposes. There, Cecil, he said, highlighting files. Medical records, school enrollment, mother's address, everything that could lead them to her. His finger hovered over the delete key. If I do this, there's no going back. They'll know I'm cooperating. They already know, Rachel said. Do it. Kane deleted the files. Then he went deeper, into backup systems, into archived records, systematically erasing every trace of his daughter's existence from the facility database. It took 90 seconds that felt like hours. Done, he said finally. They were moving back toward the hallway when Vance's warning shout made Rachel dive sideways, tackling Kane to the ground as gunfire tore through the doorway they'd been about to exit. She felt something hot and sharp graze her shoulder, not a direct hit but close enough to draw blood. Vance returned fire from her position near the ambulance bay doors. 3 hostiles, East Corridor. Rachel pulled Kane behind a medical cart as more rounds punched through the thin drywall. She could hear the attackers communicating, coordinating their approach. Professional, military trained, probably former special forces, just like the operators who'd stormed the federal building. "We're pinned," Vance called out. "Can't reach the bay without crossing their line of fire." Rachel's mind raced through tactical options. The medical wing was a kill box, long hallway, limited cover, no alternative exits except the way they'd come in. The attackers knew it. They were taking their time, moving methodically, confident in their advantage. She looked around the room for anything useful. Medical supplies, monitoring equipment, an oxygen tank mounted on the wall, an oxygen tank. "Vance!" Rachel pointed at the tank. "Shoot it when I say." Vance understood immediately. She adjusted her position, weapon trained on the tank. Rachel grabbed Kane and pulled him toward a treatment room that would put a concrete wall between them and the explosion she was about to cause. Now! Vance's shot was perfect. The tank ruptured and the compressed oxygen exploded outward with enough force to blow out the ceiling tiles and knock the attackers off their feet. Rachel didn't wait for the smoke to clear. She ran, dragging Kane with her, past the disoriented attackers, and through the ambulance bay doors that Vance held open. The bay was empty except for one vehicle, a prisoner transport van with heavy armor and reinforced windows. Rachel yanked the driver's door open and climbed in, Kane scrambling into the passenger seat while Vance covered their backs. "Keys!" Kane gasped, pointing at the visor where they hung on a ring. Rachel started the engine as Vance jumped into the back, slamming the doors shut just as the attackers recovered enough to start firing. Rounds pinged off the armored exterior. Rachel threw the van into drive and floored it. The bay door was closed. Rachel aimed for it anyway, remembering that these doors were designed to open from the inside in emergencies. The van hit the door at 40 miles per hour, and it buckled outward, tearing free from its tracks. They burst into the parking lot in a shower of metal and broken glass. More gunfire followed them. Rachel weaved between parked cars, using them as cover, heading for the facility exit. Behind them, she could see armed men piling into vehicles to give chase. Ahead, the exit gate was closing, someone in the security center trying to trap them inside. "Hold on," Rachel said, and accelerated. The van hit the closing gate hard enough to tear it partially free. Metal screeched against metal. The windshield cracked but held. Then they were through, onto the main road, with 3 vehicles in pursuit. "This is bad," Vance said from the back, reloading her weapon with ammunition she'd scavenged from somewhere. "This is really bad." Rachel couldn't argue. The prisoner transport van was armored but slow, built for security, not speed. The vehicles behind them were civilian SUVs, probably faster, definitely more maneuverable, and she had no plan beyond getting away. Kane was pale and bleeding from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the dashboard during their exit. "Where are we going?" "Away from people who want to kill us," Rachel said, taking a corner too fast and feeling the van's weight shift dangerously. "That's not a plan." "It's the only plan we have." Vance leaned forward between the seats. "We need backup. I'm calling—" She stopped, her phone in her hand. "Who do we call?" "If Ashford is involved, he can intercept any official channels. FBI, DOJ, even military command could be compromised." "Media," Rachel said. "We go straight to the press. Can't kill a story if it's already broadcast. They'll kill us before we reach any reporter. Then we broadcast it ourselves." Kane pulled out his phone, hand still shaking but functional. "Social media, live stream, whatever. If enough people see it, if the testimony is public, they can't bury it." Rachel glanced at him, surprised. "That might actually work." "It's insane," Vance said. "So is everything else we've done today." Rachel took another turn, this time heading toward the downtown area where there would be crowds, witnesses, places to hide. "Set it up. But we need to be somewhere public when we do it, somewhere they can't just shoot us without exposing themselves." Kane was already working on his phone, pulling up social media apps, checking signal strength. "I can go live in 30 seconds, but what do I say?" "The truth," Rachel said simply. "Senator Ashford ordered the Shadow Medical Unit destroyed. He's been protecting defense contractors conducting illegal experiments on veterans. You were part of it. You're testifying to it now. Say that." "They'll destroy me." "They're trying to kill you. Little late to worry about your reputation." Rachel checked the rearview mirror. The pursuing vehicles were still there, maintaining distance but not closing in, waiting for something. That made her nervous. Vance saw it too. Why aren't they attacking? Because we're heading into populated areas, Rachel said. They can't risk a high-speed gunfight in front of civilians without drawing attention. So they'll wait until we stop, somewhere isolated, somewhere they can contain it. Rachel nodded. Which means we don't stop. Not until we're somewhere so public that attacking us would be suicide. Where? Rachel thought fast, mentally mapping the city they were driving through. Downtown area ahead, government buildings, business districts, and City Hall, she said. There's a council meeting tonight, cameras, press, hundreds of people. We go there, we go live from the steps, and we say everything before they can stop us. That's 5 miles from here, Vance said. Can we make it? We're about to find out. Rachel pushed the van harder, weaving through traffic that honked and scattered. Behind them, the pursuing vehicles matched their speed. She could see more vehicles joining the chase now, coordinating their approach. They were being herded, she realized, pushed toward a specific route, a specific location, an ambush. They're setting a trap, she said. They know where we're going. How? Kane asked. Because City Hall is the obvious choice. Public, cameras, safety. Vance's voice was bitter. Which means they've already positioned people there. Rachel's mind raced. They needed somewhere public but unexpected. Somewhere their pursuers couldn't have predicted. Somewhere with witnesses but not so crowded that innocent people would get caught in crossfire. Her eyes caught a billboard ahead. Channel 7 News, live at 6. The news station, she said. They're live right now. We drive straight into their parking lot, walk through their front door, and go on air before anyone can stop us. They'll never let us on air, Kane protested. They will when we tell them we're witnesses in a federal case trying not to get murdered. That's a better story than whatever puff piece they had planned. Rachel changed lanes, heading toward the station. Vance, call ahead. Tell them we're coming. Tell them to have cameras ready. Vance made the call while Rachel drove. The pursuing vehicles had realized the change in destination and were closing in, trying to cut them off before they reached the station. Rachel pushed the van faster, running red lights, narrowly avoiding collisions, driving with the kind of reckless precision that comes from combat training and desperation. The news station was ahead, a modern building with the Channel 7 logo bright against the evening sky. Rachel could see the parking lot, could see the satellite trucks, could see safety just a quarter mile away. Then the first pursuing vehicle pulled alongside them and opened fire. Not at the van, at the tires. They wanted to disable, not kill. Not yet. Not while they were visible to potential witnesses. Rachel swerved, the van's weight making it sluggish, and the rounds missed. Barely. Kane, start recording, Rachel ordered. Now. Say everything. Say it all. If we don't make it, at least the recording will survive. Kane's hands were shaking, but he held up his phone, started the video. My name is Dr. Vincent Kane. I'm a surgeon at Mercy Hill Medical Center, and I'm recording this because someone is trying to kill me for telling the truth. His voice was steadier than Rachel expected. Maybe facing death had finally given him courage. Or maybe he just wanted his daughter to know he'd tried to do the right thing at the end. For 18 months, I participated in a conspiracy to conduct illegal medical experiments on veterans. I was paid by defense contractors working for Sentinel Defense Group, and the operation was protected by Senator Mitchell Ashford, who ordered the destruction of a military medical unit investigating the crimes. More gunfire. The van's side mirror exploded. Rachel kept driving. 27 people died in that explosion. The survivors were supposed to be erased from record, but one of them survived, Captain Rachel Brennan, who spent 3 years building the case I'm confessing to now. They were almost at the station. Rachel could see people in the parking lot looking up at the sound of gunfire, could see security guards reacting, could see someone with a camera starting to film. If you're watching this, Kane continued, it means they killed us. It means they succeeded in silencing the truth one more time. But I'm uploading this to multiple platforms simultaneously, and I'm sending copies to every news organization I can think of. My name is Vincent Kane. I helped murder veterans, and Senator Mitchell Ashford gave the orders. Rachel yanked the wheel hard, the van skidding into the station parking lot. She could see station personnel running toward them, could see cameras pointing, could see this moment being broadcast to thousands of people in real time. The pursuing vehicles stopped at the parking lot entrance, unwilling to continue the chase in front of cameras. Rachel kept driving until the van stopped just feet from the station's front entrance, then killed the engine. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vance opened the back doors and helped Kane out. Rachel followed, her legs unsteady, her shoulder bleeding, her entire body running on fumes. A reporter rushed toward them, microphone extended, cameraman in tow. "What's happening? Who are you?" "My name is Rachel Brennan," Rachel said, loud enough for the camera to catch. "Former Army captain, Shadow Medical Unit, and I have evidence of a conspiracy involving Senator Mitchell Ashford and Sentinel Defense Group to conduct illegal experiments on American veterans." More cameras appeared, more reporters. Station security looked confused, unsure whether to protect them or restrain them. And in that confusion, Rachel kept talking. "For 3 years, I've documented systematic abuse, murder, and cover-ups. Dr. Kane here participated in those crimes and is now providing testimony. We were just attacked by operatives trying to silence us before we could speak. That attack was recorded and is being uploaded right now." The reporter's eyes went wide. This was the story of her career playing out live. "Do you have proof?" "I have 18 months of documentation," Rachel said. "Patient records, financial transactions, communications between doctors and contractors. All of it pointing to a network of illegal facilities conducting experiments on veterans who were threatened into silence." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth," Kane interrupted, stepping forward. Blood was running down his face from his forehead cut, but his voice was clear. "I falsified medical records. I performed unnecessary procedures. I helped kill people. And I did it because I was paid to, and because I was told those orders came from the highest levels." More cameras, more questions. Station management was appearing now, trying to understand what was happening. Rachel could see the calculation in their eyes. This was either the biggest story they'd ever broken or a massive liability that could destroy them. "We need to get you inside," the station manager said. "Off the street. We need to verify." "Aho! We need to broadcast this now," Rachel interrupted, "because the people trying to kill us are watching this feed, and the moment we're out of public view, they'll try again." The manager hesitated, then made a decision. "Conference room, 5 minutes. We'll put you on air live, but you better have proof of everything you're claiming." They were ushered inside, past shocked employees, into a conference room that was hastily converted into a broadcast setup. Cameras, lights, microphones, an anchor who looked equal parts excited and terrified at what he was about to report. Rachel sat across from him, Vance and Kane flanking her. Her shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed it, her head pounded from exhaustion and stress. But she'd never felt more awake. "We're live in 10 seconds, someone called out. The anchor straightened his tie, put on his professional face. "This is Daniel Morrison with Channel 7 News, bringing you breaking coverage of an extraordinary story unfolding tonight. With me are Rachel Brennan, Dr. Vincent Kane, and Colonel Sarah Vance, who claim to have evidence of a widespread conspiracy." Rachel's phone buzzed. Text from the unknown number that had been threatening her. "Live TV won't save you. Watch." She was about to show it to Vance when the conference room door burst open. Not attackers. Federal agents. Real ones this time. Badges visible, weapons holstered. Led by a woman Rachel recognized. Assistant Director Jennifer Torres, FBI. "Captain Brennan," Torres said formally, "you need to come with us. Now. We're in the middle of, Senator Ashford just held an emergency press conference. He's claiming you're a domestic terrorist who's fabricated evidence as part of an extremist anti-government campaign. He's calling for your immediate arrest." Torres looked genuinely apologetic. "I don't believe him, but I have orders. You're being taken into federal custody pending investigation." The cameras were still rolling. The anchor looked between Torres and Rachel, unsure whether to keep broadcasting. Rachel stood slowly. "So that's how this ends. I expose the truth and get arrested for it." "That's not what I said. You don't have to. We both know how this works." Rachel looked directly at the camera. "Senator Ashford ordered the murder of 27 military personnel investigating his corruption. Dr. Kane has testified to participating in that conspiracy. And now I'm being arrested to prevent this story from going any further." "Captain Brennan, you are not helping yourself," Torres said. "I'm not trying to help myself. I'm trying to help the veterans who are still being held in illegal facilities right now. The ones who won't survive if this gets buried. Rachel's voice was steady, clear, final. So arrest me. Lock me up. But this interview is being broadcast live, and every word of it is being recorded by thousands of people who will make sure the truth doesn't disappear. Torres gestured to her agents. Take her into custody, carefully. The agents moved forward. Rachel didn't resist. She let them cuff her, let them read her rights, let them lead her toward the door. Behind her, she could hear Kane shouting that he wanted to testify, could hear Vance arguing with Torres, could hear the chaos of a story that had just exploded beyond anyone's control. As they walked her through the station lobby, past stunned employees and still rolling cameras, Rachel's phone buzzed one more time. Same unknown number. Your testimony is useless if you're not alive to give it. Look outside. Rachel looked. Through the front windows of the news station, she could see a crowd gathering, not just curious bystanders, too organized, too positioned. They were surrounding the building, cutting off every exit, and several of them were reaching into jackets in ways that made Rachel's combat instincts scream warnings. Torres saw it too. Everyone back from the windows, now. But Rachel was already calculating. She'd survived 2 attempts on her life today. She'd exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. She'd gotten Kane to testify and put everything on public record. And now they were going to kill her in front of hundreds of witnesses because they'd realized that sometimes the only way to kill a story was to eliminate everyone who could tell it. The agents around her were drawing weapons, moving into defensive positions. Torres was on her radio calling for backup. And through the windows, Rachel watched as the people surrounding the building pulled out their weapons, raised them in perfect synchronization, and prepared to turn a news station into a slaughterhouse. Then every phone in the building started ringing at once. Not just cell phones, desk phones, the receptionist's switchboard. Even the ancient fax machine in the corner began spitting out paper. Torres answered her radio, and her face went from alert to shocked in the span of 2 seconds. Stand down, she said into her radio, then louder to her agents. Everyone stand down. The armed figures outside hadn't moved. Their weapons were still visible, still pointed at the building, but they weren't advancing. They were frozen, watching something Rachel couldn't see. What's happening? Vance demanded. Torres was listening to her earpiece, her expression unreadable. The stream. Kane's confession. It didn't just upload to social media. She looked at Rachel. Someone mirrored it to every major news network simultaneously. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera. It's everywhere, and it's being amplified by... She stopped. By what? Rachel asked. Anonymous military accounts, dozens of them. Active duty personnel sharing the video with their own testimony about suspicious deaths in their units. Veterans adding their own stories. It's not just your evidence anymore. It's a movement. Through the windows, Rachel could see the armed figures receiving new instructions. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Not surrendering, just recalculating. You couldn't massacre an entire news station when millions of people were already watching the story unfold in real time. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Different number this time. The message was simple. ShadowMed sends its regards. We never forgot. She stared at the screen, something cold and bright unfolding in her chest. The other survivors. The ones she'd thought were dead. They'd been out there all along, watching, waiting, and when she'd finally exposed herself, they'd backed her play with everything they had. Assistant Director Torres, a voice called from the conference room. The anchor, Daniel Morrison, was still broadcasting. I'm being told that Senator Ashford's office has issued a statement. Would you like to respond on air? Torres looked at Rachel, a question in her eyes. Yes, Rachel said quietly. I would. Torres nodded to her agents. Uncuff her. The restraints came off and Rachel walked back into the conference room, still bleeding from her shoulder, still exhausted, but suddenly aware that the battlefield had shifted. She sat down across from Morrison while Torres conferred with her team. Captain Brennan, Morrison said, his professional mask firmly in place, Senator Ashford's statement claims you're suffering from service-related PTSD and that you've created an elaborate conspiracy theory to explain personal trauma. He's calling for a full psychiatric evaluation before any of your testimony is considered credible. Your response? Rachel looked directly at the camera. My response is that I have 18 months of documented evidence. Patient records with Dr. Kane's signature. financial transfers from Sentinel Defense Group to his accounts, communications between contractors and hospital administrators, video footage from Mercy Hill Medical Center showing everything I've described. If Senator Ashford wants to claim I fabricated all of that while having a mental breakdown, he's welcome to try. He also states that Dr. Kane is under federal investigation for unrelated medical malpractice and is attempting to deflect blame by implicating others. Dr. Kane is guilty, Rachel said flatly. He's admitted it, on camera, with specifics. And if Senator Ashford wants to explain why armed operatives just tried to kill us outside this building, I'm eager to hear his theory. Morrison glanced at his producer, who was frantically gesturing off camera. We're receiving word that the DOJ has just announced a special counsel investigation into allegations of corruption involving defense contractors, and he paused, reading from a tablet someone handed him, and unnamed members of Congress. Rachel felt something shift in her chest, not victory, not yet, but possibility. Additionally, Morrison continued, we're getting reports that FBI agents are executing search warrants at multiple Sentinel Defense Group facilities across the country. And this is just coming in. The Pentagon has announced a full audit of all contracts involving companies connected to this investigation. The anchor looked up at Rachel. It seems like your testimony is being taken seriously after all. It's not just my testimony anymore, Rachel said. It's dozens of veterans finally feeling safe enough to come forward. That's what Senator Ashford really fears. Not me, but what happens when the people he tried to silence start talking. Her phone buzzed. Text from Vance, who was across the room. Torres just got word they found another facility. 23 veterans being held, medical experiments, active rescue operation. Rachel's hands started shaking and she had to grip the armrest to steady them. 23 more. 23 people who might survive because she'd refused to stay quiet. Morrison was speaking again. We're going to take a short break, but Captain Brennan has agreed to answer questions when we return. In the meantime, we'll be showing the full statement from Dr. Kane, which I should warn viewers contains disturbing admissions of medical malpractice and conspiracy. The cameras cut and Rachel slumped in her chair. Torres approached, holding a first aid kit. Let me look at that shoulder, she said, not making it a request. Rachel let her. The bullet graze was shallow but still bleeding. Torres cleaned it with efficiency that suggested military training, then applied pressure bandages. I owe you an apology, Torres said quietly. I had orders to arrest you. I should have questioned those orders harder. You were doing your job. My job is to protect people and find the truth. Today I almost did neither. Torres finished with the bandage. For what it's worth, I'm putting my career on the line right now by not dragging you out of here in handcuffs. Why aren't you? Torres looked at her. Because I've read the case files. I know what happened to Shadow Medical Unit, and I've seen what happens when good people follow bad orders without asking questions. She stood. So I'm asking questions, starting with who gave me the order to arrest you and why they wanted you silenced before you could testify. Kane appeared in the doorway, looking worse than Rachel felt. Someone had cleaned the blood off his face, but the cut on his forehead would need stitches. Vance was behind him, phone pressed to her ear, still coordinating with someone. They're protecting my daughter, Kane said, his voice rough. Federal marshals picked her up from school an hour ago. She's safe. Rachel nodded. Good. I don't expect forgiveness, Kane continued, for what I did, for the people who died. But my daughter is alive because of you, and I... His voice broke. Thank you. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. Thank you seemed wrong when Kane's crimes had helped destroy so many lives, but his daughter was innocent, and maybe saving her counted for something. Just tell the truth, Rachel said. That's all that matters now. Vance ended her call and joined them. The facility outside Ridgemont, where they found the 23 veterans, they also found medical equipment with Mercy Hill Medical Center inventory tags, financial records showing payments to Kane and 6 other doctors, and enough evidence to connect everything directly to Sentinel Defense Group's corporate headquarters. And Ashford? Rachel asked. No direct evidence yet, but his name appears on appropriations documents approving classified funding that was later funneled to Sentinel. It's circumstantial, but damning. Torres received a call of her own. She listened, her expression hardening. Understood, thank you. She hung up and looked at the group. Harrison Locke, CEO of Sentinel Defense Group, was just arrested attempting to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. He had $12 million in cash and false identification. The room went silent. So he ran, Vance said. He ran, Torres confirmed, which makes him look guilty as hell. His lawyers are already trying to arrange bail, but running like that? She shook her head. No judge is going to grant it. Morrison appeared again, ready to resume filming. 2 minutes, Captain. Are you ready? Rachel stood, wincing as her shoulder protested the movement. I'm ready. The interview lasted 90 minutes. Morrison asked hard questions, and Rachel answered them without hedging. She described the explosion that killed her unit, the 3 years of investigation, the evidence she'd collected, the veterans who'd suffered, and finally, the conspiracy that connected doctors, contractors, and politicians in a network of crime that spanned years. Kane gave his testimony. Vance provided official corroboration. And through it all, Rachel could see Torres in the background, coordinating with federal agents, organizing raids, building cases that would take months to prosecute but were already underway. When it finally ended, when the cameras turned off and Morrison thanked them for their courage, Rachel felt the exhaustion hit her like a physical force. She'd been running on adrenaline for so long that its absence left her hollow. You need a hospital, Torres said, appearing at her side. That shoulder wound needs proper treatment, and you need rest. I need to know the veterans from Ridgemont are safe. They are. All 23 are receiving medical care at a secure military facility. Actual care this time. Torres guided her toward the door. Come on, let's get you checked out. They left through a back entrance, away from the crowd that had gathered outside the station. A federal SUV was waiting, Torres driving with Rachel in the passenger seat. Vance and Kane followed in a second vehicle. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Rachel watched the city pass by, ordinary people going about ordinary lives, completely unaware that the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Or maybe they did know. Maybe they'd seen the broadcast. Maybe they understood. Torres broke the silence. What happens now? To you, I mean. Rachel had been asking herself the same question. For 3 years, her entire existence had been focused on building this case, on exposing the truth, on surviving long enough to make it matter. She hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know, she admitted. You'll need protection. Even with Locke arrested and the investigation public, there are still people who want you dead. I've been a target for 3 years. I'm used to it. That doesn't mean you should have to live that way. Torres pulled into the hospital parking lot. We have witness protection programs, new identity, new location, a chance to actually rest. Rachel considered it as they parked. A new identity meant disappearing again, becoming nobody again, living in the shadows while other people took credit for the work she'd done. No, she said, I'm done hiding. Torres looked at her. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. At least this way I get to decide who I am. Inside the hospital, Rachel was treated by a physician who asked no questions about how she'd been injured. Stitches for the graze, IV fluids for dehydration, medication for the pain she'd been ignoring. She was given a private room and told to rest. She didn't rest. Instead, she watched the news on the television mounted to the wall. Every channel was covering the story. Her story. Kane's testimony. The raids on Sentinel facilities. And finally, reluctantly, some channels were beginning to question Senator Ashford's involvement. Vance appeared in the doorway. You should be sleeping. Can't. Too much happening. Vance pulled up a chair and sat. Torres told me you refused witness protection. I did. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Rachel shifted in the hospital bed, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. What about you? You stuck your neck out pretty far today. Career implications? Vance was quiet for a moment. I'll probably face a board of inquiry for how I handled the Kane situation. Unauthorized negotiations. Unauthorized extraction. Using military authority to circumvent DOJ protocols. She smiled slightly. But I also helped expose a massive conspiracy and save 40-plus veterans from illegal detention. So it could go either way. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is the first time in years I've felt like I was actually doing the job I signed up for. Vance stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse. She left and Rachel was alone with the television.
The news anchor was interviewing a legal expert about potential charges against Senator Ashford. Conspiracy. Corruption. Maybe even accessory to murder if they could prove he'd known about the killings. Rachel's phone buzzed. Unknown number again, but different from before. The message read, "Captain Brennan, this is Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Shadow Med. We're having a reunion. You should be there." An address followed. A bar downtown called The Anchor. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Rachel stared at the message for a long time. Shadow Medical Unit. The people she'd thought were dead, they were alive. They'd been alive this whole time, and they wanted to meet. She typed back, "I'll be there." The response was immediate. "Good, we have a lot to catch up on, and we're not done fighting." Rachel set her phone down and finally let herself close her eyes. Not done fighting, of course they weren't. Exposing the conspiracy was just the first step. Actually bringing everyone involved to justice would take months, maybe years. There would be trials, testimony, constant threats, more attempts on her life. But she wouldn't be fighting alone anymore. She drifted into uneasy sleep and woke to sunlight streaming through the hospital window. Someone had brought her clean clothes. Someone else had left a note. "Torres. Call when you're awake." Rachel called. Torres answered on the first ring. "How are you feeling?" Torres asked. "Like I got shot and spent 2 days running for my life." "Fair enough. I have updates. Locke's lawyers failed to get him bail. He's staying in custody pending trial. 6 other doctors connected to Kane's testimony have been arrested, and we've identified 12 facilities that were part of the network, all currently being raided." "And Ashford?" Torres hesitated. "He's holding a press conference this afternoon, claims he's cooperating with investigators and that he had no knowledge of any illegal activities." "He's lying." "Probably, but proving it is harder than you'd think. He's insulated himself well. Everything ran through intermediaries, shell companies, classified programs with plausible deniability built in." Torres sounded frustrated. "We'll get him eventually, but it might take time." Rachel ended the call and got dressed. Her shoulder throbbed, but the pain medication was working. She checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice and took a cab to the FBI field office where Torres had set up a temporary operations center. The building was chaos, agents running between rooms, phones ringing constantly, evidence being logged and cataloged. Torres was in the center of it all, coordinating raids, reviewing reports, building cases against dozens of suspects. "You should be resting," Torres said when she saw Rachel. "Everyone keeps saying that." Rachel looked at the evidence boards covering one wall. Photographs, financial documents, organizational charts that connected doctors to contractors to politicians. "Show me what you have on Ashford." Torres led her to a conference room where everything related to the senator was compiled. It was substantial, but circumstantial. Appropriations documents he'd signed, committee meetings he'd attended, speeches he'd given supporting Sentinel Defense Group, but nothing that directly tied him to ordering the Shadow Med explosion or approving illegal experiments. "He's good at covering his tracks," Torres said. "Then we need to make him expose himself," Rachel replied. She was studying the timeline on the board, looking for patterns. "His press conference, when is it?" 2 hours from now." "Can we watch it live?" "Of course." "Why?" Rachel pointed at one of the documents on the board. "Because he's going to lie, publicly, on camera. And when he does, we're going to prove he's lying with documents he doesn't know we have." Torres looked at what Rachel was pointing at. Classified appropriations from 5 years ago, signed by Ashford, funding a program called Medical Research Initiative 7, MRI 7. The same designation that had appeared in the financial records from the Ridgemont facility. "How do we prove he knew what MRI 7 really was?" Torres asked. "Because he visited the facility," Rachel said, pulling another document from the pile. 2 years ago, official congressional oversight visit, signed into the visitor log. If he was there, if he saw what they were doing, he can't claim ignorance. Torres was already on her phone. "Get me the visitor logs from every facility we've raided. I want to know if Ashford visited any of them. I want photographs, video, anything that proves he knew what was happening." It took 90 minutes, but they found it. Security footage from 3 different facilities showing Senator Ashford touring with Locke, walking past treatment rooms where veterans were being held, shaking hands with doctors including Kane. The footage was dated over an 18-month period. "He knew," Torres breathed. "He saw it.
He approved it, and now he's going to lie about it on national television. They watched the press conference on monitors in the conference room. Ashford stood at a podium, American flag behind him, looking every inch the decorated veteran and respected statesman. His statement was careful, measured, designed to create doubt without outright denying anything. "I have served this country for 40 years, Ashford said, first as a soldier, then as a senator. My entire career has been dedicated to supporting our troops and ensuring their welfare. The accusations being made are deeply troubling, and I am cooperating fully with investigators to get to the truth." He paused, letting that sink in. "However, I must express concern about the rush to judgment based on testimony from individuals with clear motivations to deflect their own culpability. Dr. Kane has admitted to serious crimes. Captain Brennan, while I respect her service, has spent years pursuing what appears to be a personal vendetta. We must be careful not to let this investigation become a witch hunt." Rachel watched, her hands clenched. "I signed appropriations for hundreds of programs during my time on the Armed Services Committee," Ashford continued. "It would be impossible for me to personally oversee every detail of every program. If contractors abused their authority, if doctors committed crimes, that is their responsibility, not mine. I trusted the oversight systems in place. If those systems failed, we need to reform them. But I will not accept blame for the actions of criminals I had no knowledge of." "Liar," Rachel said quietly. Torres was already uploading the security footage. Within minutes, it was being shared across social media with timestamps and locations. Ashford visiting facilities, Ashford talking to Locke, Ashford walking past rooms where veterans were being held. The press conference was still going when reporters started receiving the footage. Rachel watched as they began checking their phones, as whispers spread through the room, as one reporter stood and interrupted Ashford mid-sentence. "Senator, we're receiving footage that appears to show you visiting facilities that were conducting illegal experiments. How do you explain that?" Ashford's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment. "I visited many facilities. Congressional oversight is part of my job. These specific facilities were raiding medical research sites. The footage shows you walking past treatment rooms. Did you not see what was happening?" "I saw medical research, legitimate research that was—" "Senator, the footage is time-stamped. One of these visits was 6 weeks before you gave a speech praising Sentinel Defense Group and pushing for increased funding. How can you claim you didn't know what they were doing?" Ashford's composure was cracking. "I was shown what they wanted me to see. I'm not a medical expert. I trusted—" "You trusted the same contractors who are now under arrest for human experimentation?" Another reporter, this one standing. "Senator, did you or did you not approve funding for the program that led to these experiments?" "I approved funding for medical research to help veterans. If that funding was misused, the footage shows you touring active facilities. You saw veterans in treatment rooms. You shook hands with doctors now under arrest. And you continued supporting increased funding even after multiple whistleblower reports suggested problems. How is that not knowledge?" The press conference devolved into chaos. Ashford tried to maintain control, but more reporters were standing, shouting questions, refusing to accept his carefully prepared answers. Within 10 minutes, he abandoned the podium and left through a side door, his staff forming a protective barrier. Torres turned off the monitor. "He's done. Even if we can't prove criminal intent, his political career just died on live television." "It's not enough," Rachel said. "I need him arrested. I need him to face the same justice that Kane is facing, that Locke is facing, that every person involved in this is facing." "We're working on it. The evidence we have isn't enough. You said so yourself." Rachel stood, pacing. "He's insulated. He'll claim ignorance. He'll sacrifice everyone below him to save himself. And in 2 years, after the scandal fades, he'll be back with a book deal and a consulting job." Vance entered the room, tablet in hand. "You need to see this." She pulled up a news article. The headline read, "Senator Ashford's Chief of Staff found dead, apparent suicide." Rachel read the article. Marcus Holloway, Ashford's longtime Chief of Staff, had been found dead in his car from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A note had been left behind. "Suicide," Torres said skeptically. "How convenient." "Holloway ran Ashford's office," Vance said. "He would have known everything, approved every meeting, managed every document. If Ashford wanted someone silenced—" "You think Ashford had him killed?" Rachel asked. I think Holloway knew he was about to be thrown to the wolves, and someone made sure he couldn't testify. Rachel's phone buzzed, text from the number that had identified itself as Lieutenant Webb. Holloway didn't commit suicide. We have proof. Meet at the Anchor. Now. She showed the message to Torres and Vance. This could be a trap, Torres said immediately. Or it could be the evidence we need. Rachel was already moving toward the door. ShadowMed survived. They've been operating in the dark for 3 years just like me. If they have proof about Holloway, we need it. Then I'm coming with you, Torres said, with backup. The Anchor was a dive bar in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Rachel entered to find it empty, except for 5 people sitting at a back booth. They stood when they saw her. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Sergeant Amy Rodriguez, Corporal David Park, Specialist Jennifer Cross, and Captain Thomas Walker, who'd been Rachel's commanding officer before the explosion. Rachel felt something break loose in her chest. They were older, scarred, changed by 3 years of hiding, but they were alive. Captain, Walker said, and pulled her into a hug that hurt her wounded shoulder, but she didn't care. The others followed. Embraces. Tears. The kind of reunion that happens when people who thought they were the last survivors find each other again. How? Rachel asked when she could speak. The reports lied, Walker said. Same as yours. 6 of us made it out of the facility. We scattered, went underground, watched our unit get erased from every database. His expression darkened. And we've spent 3 years hunting the people responsible. Torres and her agents had entered the bar, weapons ready. Walker eyed them warily. It's okay, Rachel said. They're on our side. For now, Walker replied, but he relaxed slightly. He pulled out a laptop and opened a file. Marcus Holloway, Ashford's chief of staff, officially ruled a suicide an hour ago. Unofficially, we have traffic camera footage showing 3 men entering his house 30 minutes before he supposedly killed himself. And we have audio. He played a recording. Holloway's voice, panicked. I'm not taking the fall for this. I have documents, evidence. I'm going to testify. Another voice, cold and professional. Senator Ashford, thanks you for your service. A gunshot. Then silence. Torres was already on her phone. I need homicide detectives and a forensics team at Holloway's residence immediately. And I need a warrant for Senator Mitchell Ashford's arrest. Walker closed the laptop. We've been collecting evidence like this for 3 years. Every dirty move they made, every witness they silenced, every crime they committed trying to cover up the original crime. He looked at Rachel. You went public. We stayed hidden. But together, we can finish this. Rachel looked at her old unit, at Torres and Vance, at the evidence that kept mounting. For 3 years, she'd been fighting alone. Now she had an army. Then let's finish it, she said. Torres received a call. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. When? How many? A pause. Understood. She hung up and looked at the group. Senator Ashford just left his office in Washington. His security detail says he's headed to a private airport, and he's carrying diplomatic papers that could give him immunity if he reaches foreign soil. He's running, Vance said. We need to stop him before he boards that plane, Torres replied. She was already coordinating with her team. If he makes it out of the country, extradition could take years. Walker stood. ShadowMed is wheels up in 10 minutes. We've got a plane, we've got weapons, and we've been waiting 3 years for this. Torres hesitated. That's not how this works. Federal agents will take too long, Rachel interrupted. Ashford has connections, resources. By the time official channels clear the warrant and organize transport, he'll be gone. She looked at Torres. You can court-martial us later. Right now, we stop him. Torres met her eyes, weighing justice against protocol. Finally, she nodded. I'm coming with you. And if anyone asks, you kidnapped me. They moved fast. Walker's team had a helicopter waiting at a private airfield 20 minutes away. The flight to Washington took 90 minutes that felt like seconds. Rachel used the time to review everything they had: footage of Ashford at facilities, audio of Holloway's murder, financial records connecting him to every crime. It was enough. It had to be enough. They landed at a small airport outside Washington just as the sun was setting. Torres had coordinated with FBI agents in the area, but getting authorization to stop a sitting senator was taking time they didn't have. Ashford's plane is scheduled to depart in 30 minutes, Torres said, checking her phone. Private terminal, heavy security. Then we go loud, Walker said. He was checking weapons with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Fast extraction. In and out before his security can react. They approached the private terminal in 2 vehicles, moving quickly, but not so quickly that they'd draw immediate attention. Rachel could see Ashford's plane on the tarmac, engines already running. Security personnel were positioned around it. Not TSA, not airport security. Private contractors. Sentinel Defense Group contractors. He's using the people he's supposed to be investigating to protect him, Vance observed. That's bold. That's desperate, Rachel corrected. Torres received final authorization just as they reached the terminal. Federal agents, we have a warrant for Senator Mitchell Ashford's arrest. Nobody moves. The security contractors didn't lower their weapons. Their leader, a man Rachel recognized from the Mercy Hill assault, stepped forward. The senator is exercising his right to travel. You have no authority here. Federal warrant says otherwise, Torres replied, holding it up. This is a private terminal on property leased by Sentinel Defense Group. You're trespassing. Rachel saw how this would play out, a standoff while Ashford boarded his plane and left the country. They were out of time for legal maneuvering. She stepped forward, past Torres, past the federal agents, until she was standing directly in front of the contractor. My name is Captain Rachel Brennan, Shadow Medical Unit. 3 years ago, Senator Ashford ordered my unit destroyed. 27 people died. He did it to protect your company's illegal operations. And now he's running because he knows what happens when all the evidence comes out. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. Every person here working for Sentinel, your company's CEO is in federal custody. Your facilities are being raided. Your contracts are canceled. And when the trials start, you're all going to be asked what you knew and when you knew it. So you can let Senator Ashford board that plane and become accessories to his flight from justice. Or you can step aside and maybe negotiate immunity for cooperation. The contractors looked at each other. Their loyalty to Ashford wasn't personal, it was professional, and professionals knew when a fight was lost. Their leader lowered his weapon. We're not paid enough for this. The others followed his lead, stepping aside. Torres and her agents moved forward immediately, heading toward the plane where Ashford was visible through a window, looking pale and trapped. Rachel followed them onto the aircraft. Ashford was sitting in a leather chair, briefcase open, documents scattered around him. He looked up when they entered, and something in his expression shifted from fear to resignation. Captain Brennan, he said quietly, I should have made sure you were dead. You should have never given the order in the first place. Torres moved forward with handcuffs. Senator Mitchell Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, corruption, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights. Ashford stood, allowing himself to be cuffed. He looked at Rachel. You think this changes anything? You think exposing me stops it? This is bigger than one senator, bigger than one company. The system protects itself, always has, always will. Maybe, Rachel said. But today it's protecting 40 veterans who are alive because I didn't stay silent, and that's enough. They led Ashford off the plane in handcuffs, past the contractors who'd stopped protecting him, past the federal agents who documented everything. News helicopters were already circling, cameras recording a sitting senator being arrested for crimes that would dominate headlines for months. Rachel watched it happen and felt nothing like triumph. Just exhaustion. Just the weight of 3 years finally lifting. Torres approached her. You did it. It's over. No, Rachel said, thinking about Ashford's words, about systems that protected themselves, about how many others like him were still out there. It's not over, but it's a start. Her phone buzzed one final time. The message read, Captain Brennan, this is General Patricia Morrison, DOD, Inspector General. We need to talk about the future of Shadow Medical Unit. Rachel stared at the message for a long moment, then looked at Walker and the rest of her team. What future? She asked quietly. Walker smiled slightly. The one where we stop hiding and start fighting back, officially. Rachel met General Morrison 3 days later in a conference room at the Pentagon that smelled like old coffee and bureaucracy. The general was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, ribbons on her uniform telling a story of decades spent fighting different kinds of wars. She didn't stand when Rachel entered, just gestured at the chair across from her. Captain Brennan? Or do you prefer Morrison now? Rachel is fine. Rachel, then. Morrison slid a folder across the table. Your unit was officially declared KYA 3 years ago. Erased from records. Families told you died serving your country. And then you spent those 3 years proving that the people who tried to kill you were the real criminals. Rachel opened the folder. Inside were documents, official reinstatement papers, back pay calculations, medals she'd earned but never received. Her entire military career, restored with a few signatures. What's the catch? She asked. Smart woman. Morrison leaned back. The catch is that Shadow Medical Unit is being resurrected. Official this time. Full DoD backing, congressional oversight, real accountability, and we need someone to lead it. Rachel looked at the general for a long moment. Why me? Because you spent 3 years doing the job nobody else could. Because 43 veterans are alive because of you. And because every single member of your old unit says they won't come back unless you're in command. I'm not interested in medals or promotions, Rachel said carefully. I'm interested in making sure what happened to us never happens again. Then we're on the same page. Morrison pulled out another document. ShadowMed's new mandate is simple. Investigate medical crimes involving veterans, illegal experiments, VA corruption, contractor abuse, anything that falls through the cracks of normal oversight. You'll have authority, resources, and the kind of backing that means people can't just erase you when you get inconvenient. Rachel read through the mandate. It was everything she'd wanted 3 years ago before the world fell apart. A way to protect the people who'd served. A way to fight back against a system that treated soldiers like expendable assets. What about the people who tried to stop me? She asked. Ashford is arrested, but there are others. People in positions of power who knew what was happening and looked the other way. That's where you come in. Morrison's expression hardened. Your unit investigates, builds cases, exposes corruption wherever you find it. And this time, when you bring evidence to command, it doesn't disappear into a black hole. It goes straight to prosecution. Rachel thought about Kane, about the 14 veterans pulled from that first facility, about the 23 more who'd been rescued, about all the others who were still out there, still suffering, still waiting for someone to notice. When do we start? She asked. Morrison smiled slightly. You already have. Welcome back, Captain. The trial of Senator Mitchell Ashford began 2 months later and lasted 6 weeks. Rachel testified for 3 days straight, presenting evidence she'd collected, explaining the conspiracy in detail that left no room for doubt. Kane testified next, describing his crimes and Ashford's direct involvement. Then came the veterans, 43 survivors telling stories of abuse and experimentation that made the courtroom fall silent. Harrison Locke tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution refused. He went to trial separately and was convicted on 37 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, human trafficking, and fraud. Sentenced to 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. 6 other doctors were convicted. 15 Sentinel Defense Group executives. 23 contractors who'd participated in the cover-up. The trials dominated headlines for months, each conviction chipping away at a system that had operated in darkness for too long. Ashford's conviction came on a Tuesday morning in late fall. Guilty on all counts. The jury had deliberated for less than 8 hours. His sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month, but everyone knew he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. Rachel watched the verdict from the back of the courtroom, flanked by Walker and the rest of ShadowMed. When the judge read guilty for the final count, Rachel felt something release in her chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but closure. The man who'd ordered her unit destroyed was finally being held accountable. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Rachel had learned to handle press conferences over the past months, though she still preferred action to talking. Captain Brennan, how do you feel about the verdict? A reporter called out. Relieved, Rachel said honestly. Justice doesn't bring back the people we lost, but it proves that nobody is above accountability. Not senators, not contractors, nobody. What's next for Shadow Medical Unit? Rachel looked at Walker, at Rodriguez, at Park and Cross and the others who'd spent 3 years in hiding and were now standing in sunlight. We keep working. There are more veterans who need help, more crimes that need investigating. This verdict is just one battle. The war continues. Do you have a message for other whistleblowers who might be afraid to come forward? Rachel considered the question. Yeah, I spent 3 years hiding because I thought I had to fight alone. I thought the system was too big, too corrupt, too powerful to challenge. I was wrong. The system protects itself until enough people refuse to be silent. So my message is this. If you see something wrong, document it. Build your case. Find people you trust. And when you're ready, go public. Because they can only bury the truth if nobody's willing to dig it up. The reporter scribbled notes. Rachel turned and walked away, her team following. They had work to do. The dedication ceremony for the Carter Veterans Medical Center happened 6 months after Ashford's conviction. Rachel had fought against naming it after her, but the hospital board insisted. They'd built it on the site where Mercy Hill Medical Center once stood, completely redesigned, completely reformed. Free treatment for veterans. Real rehabilitation programs. Zero tolerance for corruption. And a board of directors that included 3 veterans who'd survived the illegal experiments. Rachel stood at the podium during the dedication, looking out at the crowd gathered, veterans, families, medical staff, federal officials who'd helped make this happen. Torres was there. Vance too. Even Kane, who'd served 18 months in minimum security before being released to work as a consultant, helping identify other corrupt medical programs. 3 years ago, I was just a nurse, Rachel began. Nobody special, nobody important, the kind of person who could disappear and nobody would notice. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I learned something during those 3 years. Being underestimated is a weapon if you know how to use it. People ignored me because they thought I was weak. They dismissed my evidence because they thought I was unstable. They tried to silence me because they thought I was alone. Rachel's voice strengthened. They were wrong on all counts. I wasn't weak. I was patient. I wasn't unstable. I was focused. And I was never alone, even when I thought I was. Because every veteran who survived those facilities, every whistleblower who came forward, every federal agent who chose justice over orders, they were all fighting the same battle. She looked at the building behind her, at the sign bearing a name she still didn't feel she'd earned. This center exists because good people refuse to stay silent. It exists because courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and speaking up anyway. And it exists to prove that systems can change when enough people demand it. The crowd applauded. Rachel stepped down from the podium and was immediately surrounded by veterans wanting to shake her hand, to thank her, to share their own stories. She listened to each one, understanding now that this was the real work, not the dramatic arrests or the headlines, but the daily effort of helping people rebuild their lives after trauma. A young woman approached, nervous and clearly working up courage. Captain Brennan, my name is Sarah Kane. I'm Dr. Kane's daughter, Rachel finished. She'd seen photographs. I'm glad you came. I wanted to thank you for protecting me, for giving my dad a chance to do the right thing at the end. Sarah's voice was quiet. He's not a good man. I know that. But he's trying to be better because of you. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. Kane had helped murder people. No amount of testimony or consultation work would erase those crimes. But his daughter was innocent, and maybe saving her counted for something. Your father made terrible choices, Rachel said carefully, but he also made one good choice. He told the truth when it mattered. That doesn't fix what he did, but it stopped more people from getting hurt. Hold on to that. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. Walker appeared at Rachel's elbow. Command wants to meet. We have a new case. Already? Military hospital in Texas. 3 suspicious deaths in the past 6 months, all veterans with combat-related injuries. All ruled natural causes, but the families aren't buying it. Rachel felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. Another case. Another fight. Another chance to prove that the system could work when people made it work. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow morning, but tonight we're celebrating. Walker gestured at the crowd, at the building, at everything they'd accomplished. You earned this, Captain. Take a moment to appreciate it. Rachel looked around at the center that bore her name, at the veterans who were already being treated inside, at the future that was finally possible because she'd refused to stay quiet. She thought about the nurse she'd been 3 years ago, invisible, dismissed, underestimated. That woman had been a weapon in disguise, sharp enough to cut through corruption, strong enough to survive attempts on her life. patient enough to build a case that would withstand any scrutiny. I'm not the same person I was, she said quietly. No, Walker agreed. You're better. And everyone who tried to destroy you made you that way. The celebration continued around them. Rachel accepted congratulations from people she'd never met, posed for photographs she didn't want, gave quotes to reporters who were already writing tomorrow's headlines. And through it all, she kept thinking about Texas, about 3 families who deserved answers, about a system that still needed watching. Later that night, Rachel stood alone outside the medical center, looking up at the building that represented everything she'd fought for. Her phone buzzed with a text from Torres. Ashford sentencing tomorrow. Prosecution recommending life without parole. You should be there. Rachel typed back. I'll be there. But she knew that watching Ashford get sentenced wouldn't bring back the 27 people who died in that explosion. Wouldn't erase the 3 years she'd spent hiding. Wouldn't fix a system that had allowed someone like him to operate unchecked for so long. What it would do was prove that accountability was possible, that powerful people could fall, that one person refusing to be silent could start a wave that crashed through walls nobody thought could be broken. Rodriguez joined her outside. You okay, Captain? Yeah, just thinking. About? Rachel gestured at the medical center. About how we got here. About how many people had to suffer before anyone did anything. About how close we came to losing everything. But we didn't lose, Rodriguez pointed out. We won. Locke is in prison. Ashford is going to prison. Sentinel Defense Group is bankrupt. The facilities are shut down. The veterans are safe. We won. This time, Rachel said, but there will be others. Different names, different companies, same crimes. And we'll have to fight them too. Then we fight. Rodriguez's voice was matter of fact. That's what Shadow Med does. We find the corruption. We expose it. We stop it, over and over, for as long as it takes. Rachel smiled slightly. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. Rodriguez looked at the building. You know what the difference is between us and them? They think power means you can do whatever you want without consequences. We know power means you have a responsibility to protect people who can't protect themselves. They forgot that. We didn't. The two of them stood there for a moment, watching the lights of the medical center glow against the night sky. Inside, veterans were receiving treatment they deserved. Outside, a city was continuing its life unaware of the battles that had been fought to make that treatment possible. Rachel's phone buzzed again. This time it was from an unknown number. Captain Brennan, I was held at Ridgemont facility. Your testimony saved my life. I don't know how to thank you except to say I'm starting college next month. First person in my family. Because of you, I get to have a future. Thank you. Rachel read the message twice, then showed it to Rodriguez. That's why we do it, Rodriguez said quietly. Not for the headlines or the medals, for that. Yeah, Rachel agreed, for that. The sentencing hearing the next day lasted 3 hours. Prosecutors presented victim impact statements from families who'd lost people to Ashford's conspiracy. Defense attorneys argued for leniency based on his years of service. The judge listened to everything, then delivered a sentence that would ensure Ashford died in prison. Life without possibility of parole, plus consecutive sentences on each count. No deals, no mercy. Rachel watched him being led away in shackles, this man who'd ordered her unit destroyed, who'd protected criminals, who'd put his political career above the lives of the people he'd sworn to serve. He looked smaller now, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the reality of consequences he'd thought he could avoid forever. She felt no triumph, just a quiet sense that the world was slightly more just than it had been yesterday. Outside the courthouse, she gave one final interview. How does it feel to see Senator Ashford sentenced? The reporter asked. It feels like accountability, Rachel said. It feels like a system that was broken starting to repair itself. But mostly it feels like proof that speaking up matters, that refusing to be silent matters, that building a case and standing by the truth matters. What advice do you have for other veterans who might be facing corruption or abuse? Rachel looked directly at the camera. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Find people who believe you. And don't wait for permission to do the right thing. Nobody gave me permission to investigate Mercy Hill Medical Center. Nobody authorized me to spend 3 years building a case. I did it because it needed to be done. And if you see something wrong, if you know people are suffering, you have that same authority, the authority of conscience. Use it. The interview ended and Rachel walked away from the courthouse for the last time. Shadow Medical Unit was waiting. Walker, Rodriguez, Park, Cross, and a dozen new members who'd joined over the past months. They had a flight to catch to Texas. A new case to investigate. More lives to save. "You ready, Captain?" Walker asked. Rachel looked back at the courthouse one more time, at the building that represented years of fighting, at the place where justice had finally been served. Then she turned toward her team, toward the future, toward the work that would never really end but that she'd keep doing anyway. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's go find the truth." They walked away together, a unit that had been destroyed and rebuilt, that had been erased from records and restored, that had learned the hard way that power without accountability was tyranny and silence in the face of injustice was complicity. Rachel Brennan had spent 3 years as a ghost. She'd been dismissed, mocked, underestimated by people who thought she was nothing. They'd been wrong. She'd been everything they feared, patient, methodical, unbreakable. A quiet weapon sharpened by years of being invisible. She wasn't invisible anymore, but the lesson remained. The most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody's watching. The one who sees everything, documents everything, waits for the perfect moment to strike. Rachel had been that person. And now she was teaching others to be the same, to be patient, to be thorough, to be willing to stand alone until enough people joined them that standing alone became unnecessary. The fight wasn't over. It would never really be over. But for today, for this moment, the good people had won. The corrupt had fallen. The system had bent toward justice instead of away from it. And somewhere, in a medical center that bore her name, veterans were receiving care they deserved, living lives they'd earned, getting the future they'd been denied for too long. That was enough. Not everything, not perfect, but enough to keep fighting for. Rachel climbed into the vehicle with her team, closed the door on the past, and headed toward the next battle. Because that's what heroes did. Not the perfect ones from movies, but the real ones who got tired and scared and hurt, but kept going anyway. The ones who refused to be silent. The ones who built cases instead of throwing punches. The ones who understood that real power wasn't about dominating others. It was about protecting them. The ones who'd been underestimated and had weaponized that underestimation into something that could tear down empires. Rachel Brennan had been a quiet nurse for 3 years. Now she was Captain Brennan again, leader of Shadow Medical Unit, advocate for veterans who had no other voice. And she was just getting started.